Jupiter in astrology is often associated with luck, but trust me when I say that Jupiter is so much more than just luck. Another keyword often associated with Jupiter is expansion, but I can see how that word can be elusive to some, like what does expansion actually mean? Because it's one of those words I think we all understand, but it doesn't tell us the role that Jupiter actually plays in our lives. And so it can be hard to visualize what expansion looks like in practice. And so let's dive into what Jupiter actually signifies in the birth chart before we go into what it means for every sign and house placement for both Jupiter itself and the ruling planet of your personal Jupiter placement. Let's say our life is a garden and we are the gardeners. Jupiter is kind of like the fertilizer. Why fertilizer, you may ask? It's because fertilizer is an additive resource. The soil exists without it and the seed exists without it, but fertilizer is the specific nutrient boost that allows a plant to do more than just survive. It allows it to grow and to thrive. And so in astrology, Jupiter acts the exact same way. It is the principle of increase. It represents the influx of energy we feed our lives, whether that comes in the form of luck, faith, resources, wisdom, or new opportunities. That really gives us the capacity to scale up. In the words of Chris Brennan, Jupiter is basically the yes button in our chart. While Saturn provides the walls and constraints of the garden, Jupiter is the supplies or the resources that fill that space. And as we know, different factors can affect how that fertilizer works within the garden. To start, we have to look at the soil makeup, which is the zodiac sign of your Jupiter placement. Is the ground naturally fertile and hospitable working with you? Is the soil a little bit rocky or tougher? Or is it a specialty soil or ground that has a unique composition, really requiring specific nutrients and conditions to thrive? If the soil is a little bit rocky or complex, that doesn't mean that nothing can't grow. It just means that you have to till the land, adjust your methods, and strategize before things will start to grow. But it is a spectrum, and every soil type can yield a harvest, but the effort and strategy required can differ. And then you have the garden bed, which is the house of your Jupiter placement. And technically the house tells you where the garden is actually located, the specific area of your life that is receiving this fertilizer. But crucially, the location dictates the type of harvest you get and the tools you need to use. Are you tending to a cash crop, for example, meant to yield a high profit? That's the second house, because here you grow through the accumulation of resources. The fertilizer is applied to your finances, your values, and your self-worth, and the harvest is material security. Or is this a private garden hidden behind a gate just for you with a deeper, more spiritual purpose? That's the 12th house, because here you can grow through solitude and spirituality. The fertilizer is applied to your subconscious, but the harvest is inner peace. And so the house of Jupiter really tells you the arena you must step into to activate growth and expansion. And in a way, it is what you can invest in, but it's also how your investments are returned back to you. And crucially, you also have the conditions of delivery, because whether your Jupiter is direct or retrograde will tell you how this growth is likely to be delivered. Think of this like the difference between a fast release and slow release formula for a fertilizer. Because a direct Jupiter is more like a fast release. The nutrients hit the plant instantly and you see immediate external shoots and leaves. And this helps growth and results be applied or seen directly or more visibly or externally in your life. But it leaves the question, do you know how to gain the internal wisdom to care for the roots of the plant beyond the results that you see initially externally? Whereas a retrograde Jupiter is a slow releasing fertilizer. It breaks down over time, focusing on deep internal root growth before you ever see the fruit above ground. So somebody with a retrograde Jupiter like myself will need to take their experiences, work, and adjust their strategy internally and embody that wisdom gained before they can potentially see the external results. Neither is better, they just work differently. And finally, here's the crucial part about any garden, no matter what type you have, we have to talk about the risk, because even with the best soil and perfect location, having too much fertilizer can stunt the plant's growth. Too much of a good thing isn't always good. This is like growing an invasive plant that totally dominates the rest of the garden, similar to how ego or excess or dogmatism or, enhancements in a bad way in the real world can take on so many forms that aren't always pretty. And also, not nurturing the garden enough, no matter the condition, can also yield growth that isn't optimal. Assuming the conditions needed for your garden can present a danger because it can stunt the growth because you didn't water it enough, or maybe you tried to grow the wrong plants for your plot, or you didn't add enough fertilizer, which is also similar to real life because not embodying the lessons and growth that Jupiter is trying to bring you can also result in growth that is static or just growth that you didn't expect. So with all of that being said, I will break down all Jupiter placements by sign and house to help you understand how this growth may look in your life. I will outline how this growth may come, what it may look like when growth is optimal, but also what it can look like when growth is stunted, as well as provide you with tools and applicable tips and tricks to ensure that the growth and expansion that you get is as fulfilling and fruitful as humanly possible. But also, we will be looking at the placement of the ruler of your Jupiter placement by sign and house. And so what I mean by that, because it caused a little bit of confusion in the last video, is when it comes to the ruler of your Jupiter placement, what I mean by that is that your Jupiter sits in a sign, correct? Well, that sign is going to be ruled by a planet, possibly even two planets. And the planets that rule over each sign are on the screen, so whoosh. And so the ruler of your Jupiter placement is calculated by looking at the sign Jupiter is located in, and then locating the ruling planet of that sign, and then seeing where that planet falls in your birth chart. And so the reason I want to look at the ruler of your Jupiter placement is because the nature of how a planet expresses itself in any given sign will be flavored a bit differently depending on the placement of that ruler. And so in the case of this video, it can provide another resource to help you tap into the abundance and growth of Jupiter, and it can show you another angle to how growth and expansion may play out in your life. And so now that we have the background info out of the way, go down to the timestamps to look for your placements, and let's get to the heart of the matter in 3, 2, 1, go. Jupiter in Aries, for you, growth is often something that happens when you are moving forward at a high speed. And because your Jupiter is ruled by Mars, your expansion is tied directly to your instinct and your ability to take action without overthinking things first. You are basically wired to find your luck and your biggest life lessons through being someone who just goes for things. Because if you sit around and wait for a sign or a permission slip, you can actually end up feeling stagnant, since your growth mechanic generally requires you to be the one who initiates. It is a very instinctual type of energy where your gut tells you to go, and you just have to trust that the path will likely show up for you once your feet are already moving. And so you tend to grow when you are brave enough to be the first one to do something, and when you trust your own impulses over the advice of, other people. In terms of your soil makeup, I would think of your ground as being naturally rocky and needing you to physically till the land and break through the hard surface with your own effort before anything can really start to sprout, meaning you generally learn by doing and you expand by being the person who isn't afraid to start a fire. And so when this energy hits a peak, your expansion can create so much agency. And so an example of how this dynamic could look is taking a risk on a solo project, or making a bold decision that you'd otherwise be afraid to do by yourself. And then you learn exactly what you're capable of through that process when nobody else is watching. And then later you run into a high stakes scenario where that specific grit you developed becomes the exact tool needed to secure a massive win or a payout. And so naturally you expand by proving your instincts are reliable tools for navigating the world. And the best version of this can look like a massive library of firsthand experiences where you know things because you've felt the impact of the action yourself. And this can give you a wisdom that is street smart and practical, so you end up with a high life of momentum where you aren't waiting for permission to exist. However, in the shadows, this expansion can create this scattered heat rather than productive movement, and you could find yourself expanding wide but thin, which could generate a massive volume of starts that lack density. And so the excess can look like scorching the people or the projects you care about, or it can look like destroying what you've built because you are so focused on your own movement. And if unchecked, you could fall into patterns of taking risks without following through with your plan. And so to really get the most out of this placement, you really have to embrace the themes of independence and raw honesty, and you generally need to be okay with being the odd one out and trust your instinctual nature can actually be your greatest asset. And when you lean into this, the internal result can be a feeling of absolute fearlessness and a mindset that views every challenge as a fun game rather than a threat. And so you could stop looking for external validation because you are so solid in your own identity. And externally, the results are usually very visible because you tend to see quick wins, whether it's in your career or your personal projects, since you move faster than the competition. And you could end up with a life that is full of variety and adventure if you learn to embrace this placement. And you may find that resources tend to show up right when you decide to take a leap of faith. And the result of that is really a life where you are the captain of your own ship and you actually have the results to show for the risks that you took. Jupiter and Taurus, your path to growth is usually all about being steady and methodical because your Jupiter is ruled by Venus, and so your expansion is tied to the physical world, your five senses, and your ability to create lasting value. You are generally not the type who expands by rushing or jumping into things without a plan, and instead you tend to grow by planting seeds and actually staying around long enough to watch them grow. The mechanic here is one of accumulation and grounding, where you can find your luck through persistence and by honoring the rhythm of your natural world, which means you have to be okay with things taking time because your growth is meant to be permanent. Regarding your soil, it is naturally very rich and fertile, but it is also quite heavy, and so it requires you to be patient and consistent with your care if you want to see a massive harvest, because you grow when you are being practical and when you are building something that you can actually touch and feel. And so at the absolute peak of this energy, your expansion is all about substance and the literal manifestation of value within your physical world in your life. And so an example of how this dynamic could look is maybe you invest time into a skill, maybe a savings plan, or a creative craft that doesn't show immediate returns, persisting even when it feels boring or slow. And then you wake up one day to find that this slow building resource now gives you the opportunity to establish a level of security or mastery that gives a massive payout either internally or externally and becomes completely unshakable. And so you grow by turning invisible thoughts into tangible things, and you can use these things, which could expand your capacity for endurance and the creation of true lasting security in your life. And naturally, wisdom can come from the cycle of the seasons and understanding the rhythm of having enough. And you could become the master of the material plane through steady accumulation of small wins, creating an energy that feels like putting down deep roots. But in the shadow of this placement, this expansion can become stagnant and heavy, where the energy expands downward into stagnation rather than upward. And the excess here is almost always related to overconsumption, or you might find yourself expanding your footprint but losing your ability to move. Maybe you become stagnant because you are so anchored. And so when unchecked, this could lead to you wanting more just for the sake of having it, which results in a growth of the rut, almost where you dig yourself deeper into a specific way of life that doesn't really suit you. And so you need to embrace themes of patience, quality over quantity, and sensory appreciation. And if you focus on doing things the right way rather than the fast way, you can find that the universe opens up to you. Internally, the result can be a massive sense of inner peace and a feeling of being completely unshakable. And so you could develop a mindset of abundance, where you truly believe that there is always enough and that you are inherently worthy of good things. Externally as well, the results are usually very tangible and can be impressive, and so you could end up with a stable home, maybe a good career, or a reputation for being somebody who actually delivers on their promises. And so you might find that you have a green thumb for life, where everything you touch eventually turns into something beautiful and lasting. And so the final result can be a life of true comfort, where you don't have to stress about the future because you have built something so strong and you have such a strong foundation in the present moment. Jupiter and Gemini, growth for you can be an intellectual game that requires you to stay curious and investigative at all times. And since your Jupiter is ruled by Mercury, your expansion is directly linked to how you process information and how you communicate with the world around you. And you are wired to grow through variety and being a student of life. And if you try to stick to just one thing or one way of thinking, you might actually start to wither away because your spirit needs new data to stay alive. And your mechanic is all about making connections between people or ideas that other people might miss. And so you tend to find your luck when you are being clever and when you are willing to ask questions instead of pretending like you have all the answers. And looking at your soil makeup, it is very light and aerated, almost like a specialty sandy mix that needs constant movement and a variety of different nutrients to stay healthy. This is why this placement is in detriment. You really need to care for it. And so you grow by being the bridge between different worlds and by staying agile in your mind. And when you are operating at your peak, your growth can be the expansion of perspective and connectivity, really acting as a nervous system of your environment. And so an example of how this dynamic could look is dabbling into completely different unrelated topics or social circles just because you're curious, and then maybe you find a strange link between them that most people miss, and then you're able to use that unique insight to create a solution or a conversation that bridges those worlds together, effectively creating something that can provide massive payouts both internally and externally. And then consequently, the growth you experience can be primarily intellectual and social, really expanding horizontally through your network, your writing, and your ability to learn new skills quickly. And you grow by building bridges between different people and ideas that seem unrelated, which could gain you a massive amount of mental agility so that you are never truly stuck in life. That is a gift. But in the shadow, this expansion can become pure static and noise, where you take in more and more, but it acts like a radio stuck between 10 different stations at once. And so this can lead to the excess of mental noise and information overload. And you might expand your interest so much that you lose your ability to focus, really resulting in growth on the surface where you know a tiny bit about a lot of things, but really lack the depth to actually use that knowledge. And so this could result in having way too many tabs open in your brain at once, which leads to a total inability to make a decision when it really counts. And so you have to embrace the themes of versatility, playfulness, and constant questioning, and you need to give yourself permission to be interested in multiple things and trust that they will eventually connect in a way that makes sense. Internally, the result could be a mind that is so sharp and a spirit that feels light and free. And so you could develop a mindset that is totally adaptable no matter what happens in this world, and you know you can figure your way out through it. And externally, the results can show up as a very busy and exciting life where you usually find yourself surrounded by a huge variety of friends or people or ideas or experiences. And you could find yourself having multiple streams of income or maybe several different projects going on at once, which could really help you feel growth and feel a lot of fulfillment. And you tend to become a key person in your pursuits, no matter how they look, because you are the one who knows everyone or the one that knows where to find the answers. And the results can be a life that really never gets boring and a sense of expansion that stays fresh because you are always evolving. Jupiter in Cancer, growth for you is something that often happens from the inside out and is completely tied to how safe and connected you feel because your Jupiter is ruled by the moon. And so your expansion flows through the ebb and flow of the moon's energy and is tied to your moods and your gut feelings. You tend to grow when you are being intuitive and when you are driven by your passions rather than just listening to pure logic, because for you, the mechanic of expansion is all about nurturing and containment. And so when you care for something, whether it's a project, a person, your own home, or even yourself, that thing can end up growing at a massive rate. And in a way, you can nurture your own expansion in the same way that you'd water a plant and then it would grow. And so you can find your luck when you stop trying to be tough and you start trusting those tiny hits of intuition that tell you when to move and when to pull back. And since your soil is very moist and absorbent, like a marshland almost, it needs a lot of protection and the right kind of containment to keep those nutrients from washing away. And so you can expand by creating a sense of home wherever you go and by letting your empathy lead the way. At the peak of this energy, your expansion can be the development of massive emotional intelligence and the ability to create a foundation that can withstand any storm. And so an example of how this dynamic could look is treating a small project or a struggling person with immense care and protection rather than just discarding them, building a deep emotional bond and then finding later that this specific person or project will become the sturdy foundation or loyal ally that protects you when you are the one in need. And so the growth you experience can be deeply internal and emotional, and it often shows up externally through the safety and belonging you create in your environment. And you grow by deepening your capacity for resilience and anchoring yourself in your own internal world. This expansion can be your inner safe haven until you are so solid in your own heart that you can support an entire ecosystem of people or ideas without feeling drained, and you could gain wisdom that is protective and life-giving. However, the shadow side of this placement is where the energy can become stagnant or overwatered, and the excess here is emotional overwhelm, because when unchecked, you could become an emotional sponge that takes on everybody else's problems, or you could just drown in your own problems. And instead of growing outward, you might find yourself expanding your defensiveness and your attachments to the past, really creating the growth of the shell where you add more layers of protection because you fear the outside world. And so you need to embrace themes of vulnerability, emotional honesty, and listening to your gut. And if you lean into being a caregiver, for example, no matter what it is that you're caring about, in a way that also includes yourself, the internal results can be a sense of total emotional security. You could develop a mindset where you feel completely supported by the universe, like you're always being taken care of. And externally, the results are usually seen in your environment. You tend to end up with a beautiful, comfortable home, or maybe a material safety net, or simply a circle of people who are fiercely loyal to you. And you might find that you have a magic touch with anything that requires a personal or human element, where every area of life often flourishes when you bring your heart into the work. And so the result can be a life that feels warm and filled with genuine connection. But also you'll be respected for your kindness and your incredible emotional intelligence, but also these will be the very traits that bring you the best things that you have in life, as well as a personal or external sense of growth. Jupiter and Leo, for you, growth is a creative act that requires you to be authentic and to express yourself fully, because your Jupiter is ruled by the sun, and so your expansion is directly fueled by your own sense of authentic being and your ability to radiate your true vision into the world. You are basically wired to find your own luck when you are being expressive and when you are acting from a place of virtue and heart. Meaning you don't grow by playing small or hiding in the background, and instead you tend to grow when you have the courage to stand proudly in your vision and share your unique gifts. The mechanic here is one of shining and creative output, where when you are excited about something and you let that excitement show, you can naturally attract big opportunities and also helpful people into your life. Your soil makeup is like a high-energy specialty soil that is filled with minerals and requires a lot of direct sunlight and attention to produce those big flowers that everybody stops to look at. And so you can grow when you are being generous and when you are leading with your creative spirit. When this energy is operating at its peak, your expansion can be the development of a massive creative legacy and the ability to inspire results just by being yourself. And so an example of how this dynamic can look is maybe you're daring to present a creative idea or a part of your personality that feels too big or risky to show, and you do it with pure generosity and joy. And then you find out that this act of authenticity attracts a major opportunity or an audience that never would have found you if you had stayed small or hidden. And so the type of expansion you experience can be public, or at the very least creatively fulfilling, and this can show up as fame or recognition, but it could simply also show up as shining in your own personalized way, even if it's in private. And so you grow by expanding your creative reach and your personal heart center. And this can teach you how to take up space in a way that is genuinely generous and light-filled. And you could gain a sense of wisdom that is noble and virtuous. But in the shadow, this expansion can become an inflation of the ego or a desperate search for external validation. And the excess here is too much sun, which could lead to vanity, entitlement, or the opposite. Maybe you feel too small and you feel self-esteem issues. And you could find yourself expanding your performance rather than your actual self, which is the growth of the empty stage. Or you might get caught up in focusing on the perception until you lose touch with your creative source. And it could make you develop a thirst where you chase validation in a way that cannot be quenched, or it could make you reject it altogether and keep yourself small so that you don't risk yourself putting yourself out there because you are afraid that your sun or your light could be rejected. And so to really unlock this placement, you have to embrace the themes of playfulness, courage, and being the bigger person. And you need to let yourself be too much in a way that is joyful rather than demanding. And when you do this, the internal result can be a feeling of massive self-worth and a mindset that is naturally optimistic and celebratory. And so you could stop worrying about what people think, or you could stop, shrinking yourself because you're having too much fun being yourself. And externally, the results can be quite flashy, whether it's for an audience of one or many, and you can get the big roles or the small wins or the recognition for your work or even just the confidence within yourself. And you tend to find that resources show up when you are being bold or expressive, or when you're willing to take a creative risk and to be yourself. And the final result can be a life that feels like a masterpiece, where you are loved for your big heart and your ability to bring light into even the darkest of situations. And this trait within yourself could also be what helps you see internal and external results as well. Jupiter and Virgo, growth for you is a process of refinement and thoughtful application because your Jupiter is ruled by Mercury, which in this sign means your expansion is tied to your ability to analyze details and create systems that actually work in the real world. You are wired for growth when you are being practical and when you are focused on the how of a situation, and you generally do not find your luck through big sweeping gestures or luck alone, but rather you tend to find it by doing the small things right every single day. And your mechanic is all about improvement and sorting through the noise to find what is actually useful. And so you could grow when you are looking for ways to make things more efficient, more healthy, or more helpful to the people around you. And since your soil is a bit like a very dense and structured clay, with Jupiter being in detriment here, it needs to be tilled and worked on with specific tools and nutrients to really make it productive. And so you grow when you are being the expert and when you are applying your mind to solve practical problems. And at the peak of this energy, your expansion can be the development of true mastery and the ability to refine any process into its most perfect version, which can be so fruitful despite Jupiter not being exalted in this sign. And so an example of how this dynamic could look is obsessively refining a small, boring workflow or health routine that everybody else ignores, really mastering the tiny details of it, and then later being put in a situation where these adjustments or systems that you've built provide you with the opportunities, connections, or rewards that manifest both internally and externally, meaning that your skills actually come to use and provide you something. Consequently, the growth you experience can be very practical and grounded, really showing up as technical competence. Maybe you get better physical health, or just an organized life where you expand by learning to utilize the finest of details in your daily life. And so it is the type of expansion that can feel like clearing out a cluttered room and then finally being able to breathe, really giving you a sense of wisdom that is visible in the way you create order out of chaos. But also the shadow side of this placement could turn into systematic paralysis. And so the excess here is kind of obvious. It's overthinking. And then, so instead of growing through improvement, you could find yourself expanding your worries or hyperfixation on tiny flaws, which is the growth of the critic energy, where you add more rules and checks in your life until you are too afraid to move. And so when unchecked, this excess can look like being a workaholic, or maybe you just feel paralyzed and like you're unable to move, or you could just find yourself obsessing over tiny details when the big picture falls apart, leading to a cycle of productivity for the sake of productivity. And so you need to embrace the themes of routine, service, and good enough, and you have to learn to trust that the process is working, even if it isn't perfect yet, and even if you aren't seeing results yet. And when you lean into this kind of that blind faith, almost, the internal result can be a massive sense of competence and a mindset that is calm and clear. And so you could stop feeling overwhelmed because you know you have the tools to handle anything. Externally as well, the results can be very solid because you tend to be the person who is indispensable at what you do. And so you could enjoy a lot of physical vitality, for example, because you know how to work with your body and utilize your strengths. And you could find that your resources show up when you are being useful and when you are providing real value to others. And so the final result and growth in your life can be a life that is so incredibly well run and meaningful, where you are able to be the one who actually sees the results through your mind alone. Everything you build will be through your mind and your intellect, and that is one of the biggest gifts, because everything that you build is completely up to your free will. Jupiter in Libra, growth for you is tied to the concept of balance and how you relate to other people because your Jupiter is ruled by Venus, but in a way that is much more about air and the mind rather than the physical body. And so you are wired to grow when you are looking at the world through the lens of others and trying to find a sense of harmony in everything that you do. And you tend to find your luck and your biggest opportunities when you are being fair and when you are working to create a sense of diplomacy in your environment. And since you aren't really meant to grow in a vacuum, you need the mirror of other people to see where you can improve and where you can expand. And your soil makeup is like a perfectly balanced garden that really requires a specific pH level to stay fertile. And so you have to constantly adjust and tweak your surroundings to keep things growing. And you grow when you are being the bridge between two different ideas, or when you are using your natural sense of justice to make sure everyone involved is getting a fair deal. At its absolute peak, this placement is really one where the nature of your expansion can be the development of so much social intelligence and mental symmetry that allows you to see the whole of any situation. And so an example of how this dynamic can look, for example, is maybe you're acting as a mediator in a tense conflict where you refuse to take sides, really patiently weaving together opposing viewpoints until a new shared agreement is reached. Maybe you create a win-win scenario. And then later you find that this specific act of diplomacy earned you a reputation, maybe a payout or a partnership that opens doors to opportunities you never could have accessed alone. And this growth could make you feel more sophisticated, and you can gain a wisdom that is so refined and clear. It's visible in the way that you create systems that function like a well-oiled machine by really truly understanding the why behind someone else's ideas. However, the shadow side can turn into a growth of an empty middle ground, and the excess here is often a tendency to over-rely on the aesthetic of a good life or diplomacy itself that avoids conflict rather than the reality of what's happening. And you could find yourself expanding your indecision and mental gymnastics to keep things level, potentially expanding your people-pleasing or hiding the truth, tendencies to really avoid a ripple in the water, which is the growth of a hollow aesthetic where you add layers of niceness while the foundation falls apart because you are too afraid to pick a side, and then you aren't really left with growth at all, and maybe you could have low self-confidence as well. And so you need to embrace the themes of diplomacy, harmony, and radical fairness. And if you focus on being a person who brings people together in ways that are actually honest, or, bringing ideas together in a way that is really diplomatic, the internal result can be a massive sense of inner equilibrium. And you could develop a mindset where you are no longer feeling threatened by different opinions because you know how to integrate them into your own worldview. But also externally, the results can be seen in the quality of your life or your relationships. You will see that when things are more imbalanced with how you manage things will be more imbalanced in your real life as well. So you could end up with high quality partners or friends, or you might find that you just have a magic touch when it comes to legal matters, contracts, negotiation. And you might find that, abundance comes in your life in other ways that helps you to really, find more balance and more free time in your life that allows you to really, embrace that Libra luxury. And so the final result can be a life that feels incredibly graceful and well proportioned, where you are known for your fairness and your ability to make everything around you feel more beautiful and a lot more peaceful, which is a massive tool that you can use in your life to continue to grow and expand in so many ways imaginable. Jupiter in Scorpio, for you, growth is a high-stakes process of digging deep and transforming. Because your Jupiter is ruled by Mars traditionally and Pluto, in modern terms, which really gives you your expansion a powerful and almost investigative edge. And so you are wired to grow when you are dealing with the deep parts of life, the things that most people are too afraid to talk about. And you tend to find luck and the biggest breakthroughs in your life when you are willing to look under the surface and investigate the root cause of a situation, because you aren't meant to have a surface level life. And instead, you grow through intensity and having the courage to face your own shadows or the shadows of others or the shadows of situations and systems in general. The mechanic here is one of empowerment and deep investigation, where you grow when you are taking something that is broken or hidden and turning it into something powerful and useful. And your soil makeup is like a deep, dark, volcanic earth that is so rich but also very heavy and requires you to dig deep into the ground to really find the nutrients. And so you can grow when you are being honest about your own power and when you are willing to go through death and rebirth cycles to get to the next level of your life. You will have to alchemize things to really level up. And so when this energy is hitting its peak, your expansion can be the development of an unshakable personal autonomy and psychological truth that cannot be broken by external circumstances. And so an example of how this dynamic could look is diving headfirst into a complex issue or an emotional crisis that everybody else is running away from, really investigating the root of the problem oh so deeply, and then emerging from that darkness not only with a problem solved, but with a newfound power or a resource that can provide you with massive payouts in your life in other areas of your life, which can take place both internally or externally. And the best version of this can be the expansion of your inner resources, where you could become a person who could walk through a crisis and come out of the other side with more power than before. It's like, the tough parts of life fuel you, which is so lucky in my opinion, because this gives you a raw, honest wisdom that really allows you to see through lies and illusions, and nothing can tear you down, which is kind of the best way to be. And so in the shadow, though, this expansion can turn into paranoia or obsession with holding on to power at all costs. And so the excess here is too much intensity, really leading you to expand your suspicion or your exit strategies. And this can be the growth of a crisis cycle where you subconsciously expand drama or conflict, whether internally or externally, so that you have something to fix. But when unchecked, you could find yourself digging into a situation until you've completely destroyed it, or you could find yourself shying away or fearing life in general, which really takes away from your power. And so you need to learn to embrace themes of vulnerability, deep investigation, and letting go of control. And if you lean into being the truth seeker rather than the truth enforcer, the internal result can be a sense of total personal power. And you could develop a mindset where you are no longer afraid of anything because you know you can survive and transform through any situation. And externally, the results can be life-changing. You could see big wins in your career, especially if you work in fields that really require deep research or dealing with the deeper parts of life. And you could find that resources show up just at the right time, even when you're at the lowest point, almost like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Nothing can tear you down. And the final result could be a life that is so meaningful and powerful, where you are respected for your strength and your ability to handle the real stuff that everybody runs away from, because this, for some reason for you, is what gives you the most amount of growth. And this growth can come out in so many ways, both internally and externally. Sagittarius Jupiter, growth for you is an adventure that requires you to be constantly looking toward the next horizon. And since Jupiter is actually at home in your sign, your expansion is very direct and feels very natural to you. But with that being said, you still need to know how to embrace growth to see the results of this. And you are ruled by Jupiter itself, and so your growth mechanic is often tied to optimism and being eager for new experiences, meaning you are wired to grow when you are expanding your boundaries, whether it's through physical travel, higher learning, or just exploring new ways of thinking, expanding your horizons. And so you generally don't grow by being cautious or staying in your comfort zone, and instead you grow when you are taking leaps of faith and trusting that the universe has your back. And you tend to find luck when you are being generous and when you are looking at the big picture instead of getting bogged down by the tiny details. And since your soil makeup is like this wild, untamed land that is naturally very fertile, it needs a lot of space and freedom to grow as big and fast as it wants to. And you grow when you are being the student and the teacher at the same time, and when you are always saying yes to the next big thing, even when the results are uncertain. At its absolute peak, your expansion can be the development of a massive worldview and a sense of wisdom that comes from actually experiencing the diversity of life. And so an example of how this dynamic could look is booking a trip to a foreign place or signing up for an experience out of your comfort zone on a total whim just because your gut feels excited, getting completely lost in the experience, and then stumbling upon a person or an insight during that journey that really shifts your entire life, your career path, or your life philosophy towards something something so much bigger and more abundant. And this can give you a wisdom that is infectious and allows you to inspire others to dream bigger. And naturally, you tend to grow through your dreams and by expanding your scope and saying yes to opportunities bigger than yourself. But in the shadow, this expansion can turn into growth of recklessness and a total denial of the ground beneath your feet. And the excess here is too much of everything or a lack of grounding, really leading you to potentially expand your escape routes and your desire to be anywhere but here in the present. And this can be the growth of a gambler's mindset where you expand the risks you take without actually learning from the results. And it could manifest as moral superiority where you expand your own truth until it becomes, something that's too big for you to contain. But this could also turn out to be the opposite. Maybe you feel so small and like shrunk up and put in a cage that you don't go and explore because you don't think that there is anything to explore and you don't think that it's worth it. And so to really get the most out of this placement, you have to embrace themes of honesty, exploration, and big picture thinking. And you need to let yourself be a wanderer and trust that your curiosity can be your best guide. And when you do this, the internal result can be a feeling of absolute freedom and a mindset that is naturally lucky and abundant. And so you could stop worrying about the how because you were so focused on the why. Externally, the results can be impressive or worldly, and you tend to have a life that is full of stories and experiences that other people only dream of. You could get so many surprises in your life, so much abundance that really expand your horizons, and you might find that help and resources show up for you from the most unexpected places, often from people maybe in foreign lands or teachers or mentors who can see your potential. And then the final result can be a life that is truly epic in scale, where you are loved or successful, or you find so much growth in your wisdom, your humor, and your spirit of adventure. It is your adventurous spirit that will get you the best results in your life. Jupiter in Capricorn, growth for you isn't something that just falls into your lap. You probably know this and you're probably curious what I'm going to say. It's something that you do build with your own two hands though over a long period of time, because your Jupiter is ruled by Saturn, and this means your expansion is often tied to structure, discipline, or being results-oriented, and you are basically wired to find your luck through hard work and being practical about your goals, which doesn't sound fun, but you could turn this into a challenge, and it could bring so much results. And so while other people could be looking for shortcuts, you tend to grow by taking the long way and making sure every step you take is on solid ground, which is actually a blessing. And so you can find your biggest breakthroughs when you are being stoic and focusing on long-term security instead of looking for a quick win, really meaning that the mechanic here is one of earned expansion that won't fall, kind of like everybody else's expansion could fall. And you grow when you are taking on more responsibility, when you are proving to yourself that you can handle the pressure of the real world. And since your ground is like a steep, rocky mountainside that needs you to physically carve out a path and build little stone terraces before anything can actually take root, you generally grow by being the person who stays when everybody else quits, and by trusting that your effort will eventually pay off in big, tangible ways. And trust me, when you do this, it will pay off. At the peak of this energy, the nature of your expansion can be the development of true mastery and the ability to turn abstract ideas into permanent physical institutions or results. And so an example of how this dynamic could look is voluntarily taking on heavy, complex projects that no one else wants to touch because it looks boring or hard. And you're quietly building the infrastructure for it over several years or several months, however long it takes. And then maybe you find yourself as an authority figure or an expert, or you find that your efforts simply provides you with opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise have, which can help your abundance grow both internally with like wisdom and optimism, but also externally with results. Consequently, the growth you experience can be very tangible, material, and structural, showing up as maybe career advancements or financial security, or even just like unshakable confidence, where you expand by learning to be the architect of your own life rather than just a worker in somebody else's. And you gain a sense of wisdom that is grounded and heavy. It's visible in the way that you create things that actually last and provide value for years to come. But in the shadow, this expansion could turn you into somebody with a scarcity mindset, and the excess here is often joyless ambition or even like a sense of uselessness. Like maybe you don't think that anything will ever pay off because you're so realistic. And instead of enjoying what you build, you might expand your fears about losing your position, leading to the growth of a heavy burden where you add more obligations to your plate just because you think that's what success looks like. And when unchecked, this can manifest as, even the opposite. Maybe you are somebody who doesn't go for anything at all, and you have this almost analysis paralysis where you don't act at all because you're afraid everything will crumble. Or maybe you have workaholism, or you hoard power to protect your status on the opposite side of the scale, really creating a cycle of joyless productivity where you expand your achievements or what you're building, but you lose the ability to feel them or to enjoy them. And so to really unlock this placement, you have to embrace themes of patience, integrity, and personal responsibility. And you need to be okay with things taking time and trusting that your discipline is your greatest asset, because trust me, not everybody has that. And when you lean into this, the internal result can be a feeling of absolute competence and a mindset that is calm and unshakable. And so you could stop feeling anxious about the future because you know you have the skills to build whatever you need. And externally, the results can usually be very impressive. Maybe you end up with a good career, a good bank account, or even just a life that is built on a foundation that nothing can knock down, not even the biggest of storms. And you might find that resources show up for you when you are working towards your goals and when you are providing real practical value to the world. And the final result can be a life of true authority and respect, where you are seen as a leader who knows how to walk the talk. And it is that, walk that you do that will insulate you and really provide you with opportunities beyond what you could dream of. Jupiter in Aquarius, welcome to the club. For you, growth often happens when you are willing to walk to the beat of your own drum and to see things from a detached, outside perspective. Because your Jupiter is ruled by Saturn and Uranus, this really gives your expansion a very structured but innovative edge, and you are wired to grow through sudden insights and being the person who isn't afraid to try something completely new. And so you tend to find your luck when you are being innovative and when you are looking for ways to improve systems in your life and within the world. That's kind of why I started this channel, because I also have this placement. And so you're not really meant to grow, through following the vision of others. And instead you grow when you are being a little bit of a rebel and when you are trusting your own unique vision of the future. Meaning the mechanic here is one of detachment and pattern recognition. And you grow when you can step back from a situation and see the patterns that no one else can see. And since your soil is almost this high-tech specialty soil, very innovative, quirky soil that needs a very specific, unconventional nutrient mix and a controlled environment to produce a unique harvest, you grow when you are being independent and when you are using your cleverness to solve problems. At its absolute peak, the nature of your expansion can be the development of an innovative system or innovative vision and the ability to see the future before it actually arrives. This could be personal or very worldly as well. And so an example of how this dynamic can look is maybe you feel totally alienated from a group or a cause because you disagree with how they do things, really stepping away to create your own weird experimental version of this process in isolation, even when you don't know how that's going to look. And then you watch as that old system eventually collapses while your strange little experiment becomes the new model that opens up so many opportunities in your life. And so the type of expansion you experience can be primarily intellectual and social. And so you grow through your network and through the light bulb moments that you may have, really expanding your capacity for inventiveness to connect with the big picture of humanity or even your own soul. However, in the shadow, this expansion can turn into total alienation and an ego that is addicted to being different. And the excess here could also be mental overload and a lack of grounding. And so you might expand your emotional distance or contrarian habits just to feel like your voice is worth it, really leading to a type of expansion where you take up mental space with theories but lose the ability to relate to people. Or maybe, for example, you just are somebody who has a lot of really good ideas and you kind of sit in your own little bubble and you kind of judge, oh, I would do things like this, I would do things like this, but you're so paralyzed that you don't actually know how to apply your insights. And so you really need to embrace the themes of authenticity, experimentation, and intellectual freedom. And if you focus on being the person who brings new perspectives to the table in a way that is actually helpful, the internal result, at least internally, can be a massive sense of mental and spiritual purpose. You could develop a mindset where you are no longer afraid of being different because you know your uniqueness is a superpower. And externally, the results can be innovative. You can see success in fields where your ideas are the primary resource, or you can find that resources show up to you through networks, your ideas, your visions, your friends, often in ways that seem totally random and out of the blue. You do get unexpected success with this placement. And so the final result can be a life that is truly one of a kind, where you are respected for your brilliant mind and your ability to see the future before anyone else does. And this sense of impact can bring you both results internally and externally, and all of the wisdom and the growth and the resources and experiences that you want from Jupiter. This will happen when you are true to your own vision. Jupiter in Pisces, growth for you is very open and compassionate, and it requires you to be a bit of an energetic sponge. And since Jupiter's at home in this sign, your expansion is very natural, and it can feel like a slow, steady soak into the world around you. And you are wired to grow through empathy and being open to the mysteries of life. And so you tend to find your luck and your biggest breakthroughs when you are being intuitive and when you are driven by a sense of compassion, either for yourself or for others or for the world or whatever systems that you really feel called to grow through. And you are meant to grow when you are letting go and trusting the flow of life, meaning the mechanic here is one of absorption and surrender. And you grow when you are allowing yourself to be that creative sponge, really soaking up the beauty and the lessons of the world and then turning it into something meaningful. And because your ground is like this soft, mossy clearing that naturally absorbs everything in the atmosphere, it really needs, a gentle touch to keep its delicate balance. And you can grow when you are being the healer, or when you are using your empathy to really connect with something bigger than yourself, even if you're doing something a little bit left-brained, or even if you're just really focusing on yourself and you want that growth to be a very personal, experience. And at the absolute peak of this energy, your expansion can be the development of a universal compassion and the ability to see the divinity in every person and situation. So for example, this dynamic can look like maybe you have this feeling or this inexplicable urge to go to a specific place or reach out to a specific person despite having no logical reason to do so. And you really trust that pull completely. And then you arrive there to find that you were exactly where you needed to be to receive a life-changing opportunity or a payout, or even just this insight that maybe logic could never really fully provide you. Like, it doesn't make sense, but something just works out. And consequently, the type of expansion you experience can be deeply internal, creative, and spiritual, and you tend to grow through your dreams, maybe your art, your intuition, your gut, and expanding your spiritual boundaries, even if you're not that spiritual, so that you can be a source of creation without losing your own identity. It's kind of like trusting the flow, if that makes sense. But in the shadow, this expansion can turn into confusion or the loss of the self. And the excess here is emotional drowning or a total lack of structure. And you might find yourself expanding your escapism or your habits or checking out because you don't know how to handle the intensity of the world's pain, which is where maybe you could grow into somebody who feels like you are being closed off or small, or you feel trapped, where you could take on the suffering just to feel connected. But also you could become an escapist, living in a fantasy world because reality feels too hard. Or maybe you just take on so much that you just feel totally overwhelmed. And so to really get the most out of this placement, you have to embrace the themes of boundaries, creativity, and so much self-forgiveness. Self-forgiveness is key. And you need to let yourself be a sponge, but you have to be careful about what kind of water you're soaking up. So like an intentional sponge. And so when you lean into this, the internal result can be a sense of total serenity and a mindset that is naturally compassionate and wise. And so you could stop feeling threatened by the world because you know you are part of something so much bigger. And externally, the results can be magical because you tend to see success maybe through creative fields, or even like a left brain field where you use your creativity, or any role where you are helping people to heal or find meaning, or even just any field where you are really expressing your raw, authentic self through what you absorb through the world. And you might find that your resources show up for you when you are being selfless or when you are following your creative heart. And the final result can be a life that is so incredibly rich in spirit and beauty, where you are loved for your big heart and your ability to see the light in everyone or everything you encounter. And it is through this light that it will be reflected back onto you. You may find that the world is a little bit of a mirror to you, and that is when you can find fulfillment and growth for yourself. When you have your natal Jupiter in the first house, you basically are the garden, or the garden is just for you. And so most people have to go somewhere else to find their growth. But for you, the garden bed is your very own identity and the way you take up space in the world. And you can think of it like you're walking around with the most fertile soil on the planet attached to your literal skin and your presence. And the fertilizer isn't being dumped on a specific project or your bank account. It's being poured directly onto your personality and your physical body. And because of that, the harvest you get isn't just a thing that you own. It is the way people see you and the way you feel when you wake up in the morning, but it is also getting the things that you personally dream of. And you are meant to be a cash crop of personality, or someone who grows by just being more of themselves and letting that energy radiate outward like a lighthouse. And so pursuing expansion here means that you have to get comfortable being big in every sense of the word. And so an example of how this dynamic can look is a feeling of sudden internal shifts to change your lifestyle, your name, or your professional title to something that feels more true, doing it despite the fear of judgment. And then maybe finding that this new, bolder version of you attracts a leadership role or an opportunity or a payout, either internally or externally, that the old you never would have considered. Internally, though, you can start to feel a sense of I can handle anything, which isn't an ego thing, but more of a deep-seated trust in your own existence. And externally, this can manifest as people naturally gravitating towards you or giving you opportunities because they like your energy. However, the warning here is to ensure the bigness doesn't manifest in a way that isn't beneficial towards either extreme, whether it's having too much ego or simply not placing enough significance on yourself because you focus on what you lack. And this could really, create a self-image that doesn't serve you. And so to spot the right opportunities for growth with this placement, you have to look for things that feel like they're challenging you to be more authentic. And if an opportunity requires you to shrink yourself or to play a background character, that's probably not your Jupiter talking. And you'll know a real growth moment is happening when you feel a bit of good stage fright, or that feeling where you're about to step into the spotlight and it feels risky, but it feels right. So look for situations where you're asked to be the face of something, or where you have to rely solely on your own charisma or your character or your skills to get a result. And if the path ahead involves you becoming more of a defined version of yourself, that is where your luck and expansion are hiding. If your natal Jupiter is in the second house, your garden bed is located right in your vault and your tool shed. And this is the classic cash crop garden where you're tending to things that you actually own and the values that you hold close to your chest. And the fertilizer is really being applied to your relationship with money, your possessions, your skills, your talents, and your sense of self-worth. It's the resources you have, whether it's internal or external. And it's also the value you have. And so you aren't growing through vibes or philosophy as much as you're growing through the tangible physical world and what you have to offer. And the location of this garden means that the soil is so rich in resources, and the tools that you use are your own skills and your talents, meaning your harvest is material security and a rock solid belief that you are worthy of having nice things and a comfortable life. And so expanding in this area involves a mix of practical, maybe money management, or a massive shift in how you value your own time. And so an example of how this dynamic can look is maybe finally spending the extra money to buy the high quality tools or the education you need to work instead of making do with the cheap versions, and then watching as that investment signals to the universe or the world or yourself that you are high value, which results in you being able to double your rates or attract premium work or to get the results that you're looking for. And internally, you can get this deep sense of stability where you are no longer panicked about the what ifs of survival. And externally, this is where the wealth can come in, which could manifest as a sudden raise, maybe finding valuable items for a steal, or your assets appreciating way faster than you expected. But the negative manifestation that I hear a lot can be either slipping into pure materialism or greed, or maybe the opposite. Maybe you simply feel cursed due to a lack of resources and self-worth in your life, which could result in maybe you having a scarcity mindset rather than a circulating or investing mindset. Or it could even make you someone who repels material security, as a lot of your life will be about learning how to expand this area of life for the best. And I know a lot of people say, well, I don't have money and I have Jupiter in the second house. Start with investing in your resources. And so spotting spotting a proper growth opportunity in the second house is all about the value exchange. And if you see a chance to turn a talent into a stream of income, or if a situation feels like it's going to make your daily life more comfortable or beautiful, that is a green light. And you want to look for opportunities that have longevity written all over them. Nothing about getting rich quick, but things that, feel like they have deep roots. And if an offer makes you feel more secure and less scrappy, it's likely a Jupiter gift. And so you should pay attention to moments where you are asked to stand up for what you believe in, standing firm in your values, and this will often act as a magnet for material expansion in so many ways, both internally and externally. With natal Jupiter in the third house, your garden bed is basically the local neighborhood and the way that your brain processes information, your immediate environment. And it's like your garden is a community plot where everyone is stopping by to chat and trade seeds. And the fertilizer here is applied to your communication, your mindset, maybe your immediate environment, maybe your siblings or neighbors or your daily commute are involved, or simply just, the way that you sort through problems mentally and the way you talk. And so you can grow through the pollen of ideas that is being carried back and forth. And the location really dictates that you need to be curious and busy, because this isn't a garden where you meditate in silence. Your harvest is this brilliant, flexible mind and a massive network of people or ideas that always give you the information or the connections that you need. And so pursuing expansion in the third house is all about being a perpetual student of life. And so an example of how this dynamic can look is maybe taking a short weekend trip to a nearby town, or starting a conversation with a stranger at your local coffee shop because you're curious, learning a seemingly random piece of information in this, and then realizing days later that that specific tidbit is exactly what somebody in your life needed, or even you needed to solve a major problem, really positioning you in a much better area of your life. And you can receive this payout either internally or externally because of this insight. And receiving growth here can feel like a constant stream of serendipity in your daily life. And internally, it can manifest as a very busy, optimistic, and fast-moving mental state where you can find yourself solving problems so quickly because your mind is always looking for the big picture and the small details. You're very good at solving problems. But the negative manifestation of this placement is becoming a know-it-all or a gossip who scatters energy across trivial subjects, or conversely, on the other side, maybe just feeling mentally blocked, where you convince yourself that you aren't smart enough to contribute anything, leading to silencing your own voice out of fear that no one wants to hear what you have to say, or that you don't like what you have to say. And so to spot proper opportunities in the third house, you should look for things that involve learning or teaching. And if a project requires you to improve your communication skills like public speaking, writing, social media, that is a huge Jupiter indicator for you. But also look for local opportunities that feel like they have the potential to go wide. So if something feels like a fun little experiment or a chance to satisfy your curiosity, it could be the start of a major expansion. And any situation that asks you to be a messenger or to share information is where your luck can be waiting. And it feels like you're going to have to keep your brain on its toes and keep yourself moving, because this is your ultimate path to growth. If you have your natal Jupiter in the fourth house, then you have the garden bed, or the house of your Jupiter placement, tucked away in the most private, protected part of your life. And this isn't a garden that everybody can just access. This is more of like a private garden. It's hidden behind a gate just for you or your family. And this really has a deeper and more spiritual purpose. And so technically, the house tells you where your garden is located. So in your case, that fertilizer is being poured into your home, your roots, maybe your innermost self or your family, and who you are at your core. And the location really dictates the type of harvest you get. And since it's in the fourth house, your growth will happen from the ground up. It will start with your emotional foundation, and it will work its way up to literal security. And so the harvest isn't a trophy. It's not a paycheck. It is a deep, unshakable sense of inner peace and belonging that nobody can take away from you. And this can come in so many ways. And so pursuing expansion and growth here is a very inside-out process. And so an example of how this dynamic can look is spending time healing a deep-seated family wound, or renovating your living space to truly reflect who you are, really creating a deep sense of safety internally and externally, and then finding out that because your home is finally secure or your innermost self is secure, you suddenly have the courage to launch a risky career move or a relationship that you would have previously rejected because you were too ungrounded. And so receiving growth in the fourth house can feel like having a literal safety net underneath you at all times. And internally, you can start to feel this massive warm sense of home inside your chest, so you don't feel as lonely or adrift as other people when things get chaotic. However, the trap here can be becoming so insulated in your own private kingdom that you become recluse, or maybe you swing to the other extreme and you could feel completely unrooted and cursed by your past, really refusing to build a home because you were so focused on the family trauma that you don't believe that you deserve a safe haven. And so to spot the right opportunities for growth with this placement, you gotta look for things that make you feel rooted rather than things that make you feel, a little bit uncomfortable. And if an opportunity requires you to sacrifice your privacy or your family time or your innermost self for the sake of, an external gain, that's probably a trap. And you'll know proper growth is happening when you feel a sense of coming home to a new idea or a new place. And so look for chances to invest in property or to heal old rifts with your parents or to build a chosen family that really sees you. And if a situation makes your inner world feel bigger and more stable, that is where Jupiter is probably trying to lead you. With Jupiter in the fifth house, your garden bed is located right in the center of the playground. And this is a cash crop situation, but the profit isn't just money. It can be pure joy, creativity, self-expression, children, maybe even romantic encounters. And so the fertilizer being applied to your hobbies, your romantic life, and even children if you have them. And so the location dictates that you grow through the harvest of what you personally create and put out in the world. And you are meant to be radiant, expressive in whatever way that means for you, really matching the nature of the sign of your Jupiter, obviously. And you're somebody who will grow by letting your light shine without worrying if you're being too much. And so expanding in this area is all about taking creative risks and letting yourself play like a kid again. And so an example of how this could look is maybe starting a creative hobby or a passion project purely for the fun of it without worrying if it'll make you money, letting your inner child run wild, and then watching as that specific project accidentally goes viral, providing an internal and external payout. Or maybe it attracts a romantic partner who falls in love with you for exactly who you are because you weren't afraid to just be yourself. And so the way growth is received here is usually very bright and celebratory, and internally you can get this constant wellspring of inspiration where you never really run out of ideas or a spark, really finding that your baseline mood is just a little bit more optimistic and playful than the average person. But the danger here can be letting this desire for expression curdle into maybe narcissism or gambling, or it could be the opposite. It could just suppress your spark where you really feel cursed to be invisible and refuse to participate in joy because you've convinced yourself you're not worthy of whatever you're creating or you're not worthy of fun. And so spotting proper growth opportunities in the fifth house means looking for things that feel like a spark. And if an opportunity feels dry, boring, or sensible, it may not be for you. And so you want to look for things that make you feel a bit of that good adrenaline, like stepping onto a stage or maybe showing someone your art for the first time or really tackling that project, even if it's in a more humble sign like Capricorn. And so pay attention to moments where you can be the creator of something. And if a situation offers you a chance to express your unique personality or to lead with your heart rather than your head, that's Jupiter calling. And if it feels like play, it's probably going to lead to your biggest expansion. If your Jupiter's in the sixth house, your garden bed could be located in the tool shed, in the daily kitchen. And this is a very practical, functional place where the fertilizer is being applied to your day-to-day routine, your work, and your physical health. And so technically, the house tells you where this garden is located. And so for you, it's in the engine room of your life. And so the location dictates that your growth doesn't come from grand gestures or big stages or burning yourself out. It's from the way that you handle the small mundane systems in your life. And so your harvest is a life that runs like a well-oiled machine, or learning to understand your body and how to use it to its fullest potential, no matter what state you're in, and a sense of deep satisfaction from being helpful to the world and with yourself, because you can find magic in even the mundane, which is so lucky because a lot of people can't find the magic in their day-to-day life. They have to do something bigger, And so pursuing expansion and growth here means really getting into the weeds of your daily habits. And so an example of how this dynamic could look is finally committing to a specific boring health routine or organizing a chaotic workflow at your job simply to get some peace of mind, mastering the daily rhythm, and then realizing that when a massive high pressure opportunity lands in your lap, you are the only one with the physical stamina or the organizational structure or the experiences to say yes and handle it with ease. Or it could look like maybe taking a pain point in your routines and creating a platform of opportunities from it. So receiving growth in the sixth house can feel like a smoothness that most people struggle to find. And internally, you can start to feel a deep sense of competence or feeling that I know how to handle this regardless of what happens. But be careful not to expand the workload to the point of being a martyr where you believe that you're the only one who can do it right. Or maybe you can swing to the opposite and maybe you could feel cursed by the daily grind, refusing to organize anything because you view structure as a prison, really leaving you drowning in a chaos of your own making. And so to spot the right growth opportunities here, you have to look for the work within the work. And if an opportunity allows you to improve a system or help a lot of people or get better at a specific skill, that is a green light. So don't simply look for achievement because that's more of the 10th house. Look for efficiency, and you'll know proper growth is happening when a task that used to feel like a chore suddenly feels like a mission. So look for chances to mentor others in your field or to start a new health regimen that feels expansive rather than restrictive. And if a situation makes your daily life feel more organized and your body feel more alive, that's where you need to be, and you will open more opportunities beyond your horizons. If you have Jupiter in the 7th house, then you have the garden bed or the house of your Jupiter placement located right at the meeting point between you and another person. And so technically the house tells you where this garden is located. And in this case, it is a public park or a shared plot where you're always tending to the soil with your one-on-one connections, whether romantic or platonic. And the fertilizer isn't just for you, it is being poured onto your relationships, your contracts, and the way you connect with another. And so the location really dictates that your best tools aren't things that you use alone, but things like compromise, diplomacy, shared vision, or even just curiosity about human nature. I have this placement, and that is one way it manifests for me. And so your harvest isn't something that you can hold by yourself, but it is a life filled with supportive, expansive people or lucky connections that open doors that you couldn't reach on your own. And I know a lot of people say they struggle with connection with this placement, but it is about finding connection that resonates with you, even if it's not romantic. So pursuing expansion and growth here means that you got to get used to the idea that you're not meant to do life solo. And so an example of how this dynamic could look is maybe you agree to a collaboration or a partnership that feels a little intimidating because it requires you to compromise your full control or trusting the other person's vision or making yourself vulnerable because you're not used to partnership. And then you find that this partnership could open doors that you never would have opened otherwise. Or this could look like actively going out of your way to help people you are connected to, really understanding their needs in the moment. And then that person or experience helps you to open opportunities and a payout that can help you grow in so many ways. And so the way growth is received in the 7th house is almost always through other people, or at least a focus on other people and the way you care and connect with others. And internally, you can start to feel this massive sense of harmony and balance where you don't feel the need to fight for your space because you know you're supported. However, the shadow side here can be a tendency to lose your own identity in the vastness of somebody else's, or conversely, maybe a hyper independence born of fear where you could feel cursed in love or in connection or in how you relate to others, and you refuse to trust anyone, effectively blocking the very connections that you need to grow. So to spot proper opportunities in this house, you have to look for the handshake. And even if an opportunity involves a we rather than an I, it could be a Jupiter moment for you. And even in things you pursue alone, because you don't have to do everything with another person, obviously, having another person's input, for example, could really expand your potential. And you want to look for situations where you are feeling like you're meeting your match, maybe people who challenge you to be better and think bigger. And if a deal feels fair, balanced, and involves a lot of mutual respect and win-win scenarios, that is a green light. And so don't look for the things that you can win at someone else's expense. Look for the things where everybody wins, and you'll know that you're on the right path when you feel a sense of click with another person. It's like two pieces of a puzzle finally coming together to make a big picture. And it really starts with healing your own relationship with connection itself, because you need to be the one to make the first move at times. And if you are willing to do that, you never know who you'll meet. Jupiter in the 8th house, your garden bed is located in the deep underground greenhouse where the rare and mysterious stuff will grow. And this is kind of a private garden hidden behind a gate just for you, but it's even deeper because it's the soil of transformation, shared resources, intimacy. And technically this house will tell you where your garden is located. So this is the arena of intimacy, other people's money, and the deep psychological parts of the soul and, transformative experiences like life and death. And the location really dictates that tools that you can use for expansion are things like vulnerability, research, and the courage to look at the shadow stuff. And so your harvest is a life of resilience, deep soul merging with others, and maybe even a strange kind of financial luck that comes from things like investments or inheritances or marrying rich or whatever it may be. And so pursuing expansion here is a very intense diving into the deep end kind of process. And so an example of how this could look is maybe you bravely face a deep psychological fear, an intimate connection, or a complex financial entanglement like a debt or a credit card utilization issue, rather than ignoring it. And you do the deep research to understand the dynamics of how they affect your life. And then you somehow emerge with a newfound mastery of your own psychology and resources that end up opening doors, opportunities, or payouts, both internally and externally, because you opened yourself up to these vulnerable parts of life. And receiving growth in the 8th house can feel like having a superpower of regeneration. Maybe you're a manifester, and internally you can start to feel this massive quiet power where nothing really scares you anymore because you know you can survive anything. But be careful, because the danger here is expanding the drama or the debt to the point of addiction, or on the flip side, you could live in a paralyzed state of paranoia where you refuse to share anything, emotions or money, because you feel cursed by potential loss, really causing your soul to wither in isolation. And so spotting proper growth opportunities in the 8th house means looking for the things that feel transformative rather than just new. And if an opportunity asks you to change at a soul level or to trust somebody with your deepest secrets or resources, this could be a Jupiter indicator. And you want to look for the hidden value, the stuff that other people are too scared to look at. And if a situation feels a little bit spooky or intense, but also feels like it's going to make a difference in your power, that is a green light. You can't lose your power in this process. And so pay attention to moments where you can merge your talents with somebody else's to create something bigger than both of you. And if it involves unlocking a mystery or a deep emotional truth, that can be where your expansion is hiding. If your Jupiter's in the 9th house, your garden bed is an open field that stretches all the way to the horizon. And this is the higher learning garden where your fertilizer is being applied to your beliefs, your philosophy, your need for freedom and expansion and going out of your comfort zone. And technically, the house tells you where this garden is located. So for you, it's in the arena of expansion, going out of your comfort zone, maybe foreign travel and the big picture. And so the 9th house is anything that expands your horizons and worldview. And so the location really dictates that you can't grow if you stay in one place for too long, internally or externally. And so your tools are your passport, your library card, or your curiosity. And your harvest can be a life full of wisdom, a sense of meaning that keeps you going in a world that feels like it's your literal oyster. And so expanding in this area of life involves a constant quest for more. And so an example of how this dynamic could look is deciding to learn a new language, or maybe traveling to a foreign culture, or studying a philosophy that completely contradicts how you were raised, allowing for your worldview to be shattered and rebuilt, and then finding that this new perspective allows you to connect with a global audience or opportunities that were previously invisible to you. And you could see payouts both externally and internally for this. And so the way growth is received here is through a sense of cosmic favor or a massive perspective. And internally, you can get this unshakable optimism or the feeling that everything is going to work out because you understand the bigger plan. However, the trap is to avoid becoming maybe a dogmatic preacher who bulldozes over others with self-righteousness, or even in the other extreme, maybe you reject any meaning at all, or you feel cursed by a lack of meaning meaning, really refusing to explore or believe anything because you're terrified that the world is actually empty and pointless. And so to spot the right growth opportunities in the ninth house, you have to look for the wide view. And so if an opportunity involves traveling somewhere you've never been, or learning something that changes your mind, or sharing wisdom with a larger audience, that could be a green light. And don't look for the smaller local wins. Look for things that feel international or universal, and you'll know proper growth is happening when you feel a sense of awe or wonder. And if a situation makes you feel like you're part of something much bigger than yourself, no matter even if it's at home and you're just reading a book, or if it challenges your current comfort zone, that could be your Jupiter calling. And if it feels like freedom, it will be your path to growth and expansion. If you have Jupiter in the 10th house, then you have the garden bed, or the house of your Jupiter placement, sitting in the middle of the town square. And technically this house tells you where the garden is located. And so the specific area of your life receiving the fertilizer will be the area of your career, your role in the public eye, or maybe even diving into the quest of learning what leadership and success mean to you. It's your public role in this world. It is the very top of your chart. It's very visible. And so the fertilizer is applied to your public reputation and your ambitions, and the harvest can be material security or public respect, as long as you wield the lessons of the sign your Jupiter is in. And because this garden is so visible, everybody gets to see what you're growing, which means your success won't just be a private thing. It'll be something that defines your place in the world. And so pursuing expansion and growth here means you got to get comfortable with the idea of being an authority figure, and you need to embrace visibility as a potential weapon instead of fearing it. And so an example of how this dynamic could look is aiming for a high stakes promotion or public facing role that feels slightly out of your league, choosing to lead with authenticity and courage rather than shrinking yourself, and then finding that this pursuit opens up further opportunities for visibility, growth, knowledge, or even success, even if it takes trial and error at first. And if anything, trial and error is key to this house, since these experiences, even at your lowest points, will also be the tools that you can use to relate to others and stand in your authority. And so the way growth is received in the 10th house is through maybe being lucky in how strong of a leader you can be. And this can be a very high profile kind of success. And internally, you can start to feel this massive sense of purpose and a deep knowing that you are doing what you were put on this earth to do. However, there is a slippery slope here that can become maybe addicted to the power trip, where you view people as stepping stones. Or on the opposite side of the spectrum, you could suffer from crippling imposter syndrome, where you feel cursed to fail, causing you to shrink away from the spotlight and refusing the very leadership roles you were born to take because you don't think you're good enough for it. And so to spot proper growth opportunities in this house, you have to look for things that feel like you're leveling up, even if it's not just from a career standpoint, because I know this economy can be hard. And if something does require you to step up or take the spotlight or to take on a title that feels intimidating, that is a green light. And so you want to look for the things that have longevity and public impact. And if a situation offers you the chance to really refine how you climb this ladder, no matter how that ladder looks, or to change the way an industry looks, or to lead in a new way, that is your Jupiter calling. And so don't look for the easy behind the scenes tasks. Look for the roles that put you in charge. And you'll know that your real growth moment is here when you feel like you're finally being given the keys to the kingdom in your professional life. And so any opportunity to learn how to embrace this role, that is your key to gold. With natal Jupiter in the 11th house, your garden bed is located in the big community plot where all of your friends or your peers or the societal causes and networks hang out or could be born. And technically, the house tells you where this garden is located. And so this is the arena of your social circles and your long-term goals or your role in society. And so the fertilizer is being applied to your friendships, your place in society, and your vision to the future. And in a way, it is what you can invest in, but it's also how your investments are returned back to you through the people or the connections you have. And so the location dictates that you can't just grow in a vacuum. You really need a tribe or a cause or, something bigger to go towards. And so your harvest is a massive network of support and the realization of your big dreams through collective effort. And so expanding in this area of life means being a connector and a visionary in whatever way that you resonate with. And so that will likely match the nature of the sign of your Jupiter placement. And so an example of how this dynamic could look is joining a community organization or introducing two people from different parts of your life simply because you think they'd get along, engaging without expecting an immediate return, and then watching as the network rallies around you years later to fund a dream project or to provide an exact support system that you need during a crisis. And so receiving growth in the 11th house could feel like having a literal army of people who have your back, or it could feel like having goals that give you deep, fulfilling senses of purpose. And internally, you can start to feel this deep sense of belonging to something bigger than yourself and optimism about where the world and your life is going. But the trap that you have to watch out for can be losing your own voice in the echo chamber of the group, or feeling like an outcast who is cursed to never belong, really leading you to isolate yourself and refusing to join the very networks that could help you thrive, especially if you've been burned by networks in the past. And so spotting proper growth opportunities here means looking for the group win. And if an opportunity involves making a difference, networking, teamwork, or social activism, it could be Jupiter's gift. And so you want to look for things that feel progressive and forward thinking. And if a project feels like it's going to make a difference in whatever way resonates with you, or if it involves a diverse group of thinkers who can really expand your horizons, could be a green light. And so pay attention to random invitations you get to events or meetings, and pay attention to things on social media or within groups that inspire you personally, because your biggest breaks with this placement usually comes through a network where you see the puzzle pieces of your life coming together, and it can feel like you are building a bridge to the future with a goal or a group, even if it starts as an army of one. And this is exactly where you need to be, because you will see payouts in ways that you could have never imagined. If your natal Jupiter's in the 12th house, your garden bed is that private garden hidden behind a gate just for you, with a deeper and more spiritual purpose. And so technically, this house tells you where the garden is located. And so for you, it's in unseen parts of your life, like your subconscious, the spiritual world. And so here, your growth will come through solitude and spirituality. And the fertilizer is applied to your inner world, but the harvest can be inner peace. And the location really dictates that you aren't growing through the hustle or public wins, but through letting go and connecting to something much bigger than yourself. It can be a quiet, magical kind of growth that most people might not even notice until they see the glow on your face. But even if this is a tougher type of growth, because trust me, the 12th house isn't always pretty. You know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel as long as you're willing to dive into the unseen parts of life. And so pursuing expansion and growth in the 12th house is a very surrender-based process. And so an example of how this dynamic could look is finally stopping the hustle to fix a persistent problem and instead retreating into solitude or meditation to accept things as they are, and then finding that the moment you truly let go, the problem either miraculously solves itself or a mysterious force kind of steps in to help you, or maybe to at least provide you with the answers. And so the way that growth is received here can feel like having a guardian angel watching over you at all times, and internally you can start to feel a deep sense of okayness that isn't dependent on what is happening either in the news or in your bank account or in your life circumstances. However, the danger here is that surrender can easily morph into escapism or addiction, where you use spirituality to bypass reality, or swinging to the opposite side, maybe it leads to deficiency, where you feel cursed by invisible enemies or mental health struggles. And you could feel trapped and refuse to look inward because the void looks a little bit scary and you don't know if you're going to get a jump scare. And so you just don't want to deal with it. And so I know the 12th house can be such a tough placement, and healing is easier said than done. But because your subconscious mind is enhanced with this placement, approaching your mind as a learning experience, at least trying to, even trying itself can yield results that most people could never dream of, even if you don't know exactly how it will unfold. And so to spot proper growth opportunities, look for the quiet paths. And if an opportunity requires you to step back from the noise of the world and go inward, that could be a green light. And you want to look for things that feel healing or restorative. And if a situation offers you a chance to help people who feel forgotten or to work on something in total privacy, that could be Jupiter calling. And so don't look for things that feed your ego. Look for things things that feed your soul, and you'll know it's a real growth moment when you feel a sense of release or like a heavy weight has been lifted and you realize that you don't have to carry the whole world on your shoulders anymore. When the ruler of your Jupiter sign is in Aries, your primary tool for growth can be your instinct and your ability to take immediate action. You have this ability to act as a spark plug for your own luck because your courage and willingness to go first can be what triggers the expansion. It can feel like you have an internal combustion engine almost, where the faster you move and less you second guess yourself, the more the world starts to open up for you, and you don't need to wait for permission to get started on something because your own impulse and direct approach can be the thing that makes your growth happen in the first place. It's an act now fuel that helps you grow because you can cut through hesitation that keeps others stagnant. And so in real life, this can look like making a split-second decision to apply for an opportunity, and just by being bold or assertive, you could end up securing a massive win. Maybe it looks like you deciding to advocate for yourself in a moment of conflict or tackle a challenge head-on, and suddenly your mindset shifts so much that you start seeing possibilities for your future that weren't there before. And you could find that when you lean into your competitive side or champion a cause, people start offering you ways to learn or travel or expand more because they are attracted to the fearless energy you are putting out. It can also manifest as you being the one who has to physically initiate the momentum to get a project off the ground, where your initiative can be the exact thing that turns a small idea into something bigger. And so you can use this energy to embrace growth by realizing that your impatience can be a valid form of intuition and often leads to something bigger. And even if your Jupiter is in a sign that feels slow or methodical, having the ruler in Aries means that you can be the one to light the match to get that growth moving, and you can embrace the expansion by trusting your gut reactions and desire to lead and actually be valid guides for where you should be heading next. And when you feel stuck, simply focus back on doing something brave or physically exerting your will, and that can act like a jump start that gets the wheels of your Jupiter turning again, and it makes growth feel dynamic and under your own command because you can be the one pressing on the gas pedal. Having the ruler of Jupiter being in the sign of Taurus means your consistency and connection to the physical senses can be specific tools that you use to expand, and you might find that your ability to endure and your appreciation for quality are the fuel sources that keep your growth going. It can feel like you need a rhythm of sustainability or a clear sense of practical value before you feel comfortable reaching for more. And you can use your patience, stubbornness, and tactile skills to build the foundation or comfort that Jupiter wants for you. And the more you simplify your approach and realize the power of doing things thoroughly, the more you feel like you can have the permission that you need to grow into a bigger version of yourself. And so this can manifest in practice, for example, as sticking with a project long after everybody else has quit, and the longevity could be what changes your life, or investing your energy into something tangible that pays out over time. And you might be the kind of person who needs to move at your own natural pace before you can take a leap of faith into a new career or a big move. And it can also show up as using your natural affinity for the material world, like a talent for resource management or cultivating beauty, to really create a life that feels more expansive. And you can find that your growth is tied to the concept of worth. So establishing a sense of unshakable self-reliance, or even just enjoying the simple pleasures of life, can give you the emotional grounding to think bigger and dream more. And so to embrace growth with the setup, you can lean into the idea that being slow and being successful can go hand in hand. And even if your Jupiter is in a faster, chaotic sign like Aries, you can use the steadiness of Taurus to give that energy a place to root and grow, if that makes sense. And you can embrace expansion by being a builder of things that last, and recognizing that your refusal to be rushed can be a tool to help you reach a higher goal. And you don't have to feel guilty about wanting things to be predictable, because that predictability can be the exact thing that allows you to take risks later on. And when you treat your energy and resources like a garden, the growth of Jupiter can be the natural fruit that comes from the consistent care. If the ruler of your Jupiter sign is in Gemini, think of your curiosity and mental agility as the additional tools you can use to help fuel your expansion. And while Jupiter represents the growth itself, this placement offers you a specific method to get there: the way you question things, the way you connect the dots, and the variety of data you absorb. Adaptability acts as your helpful assistant here, because the more you remain flexible in your thinking and seek out multiple perspectives, the bigger your world can become, and you have a knack for taking taking two unrelated ideas and synthesizing them into a new philosophy. And so your intellectual mind is kind of like the tool that keeps you moving forward, and you might find that being intellectually stimulated and staying in circulation with new information helps you find meaning and purpose that you are looking for. And so in a practical sense, this could look like reading an article that has nothing to do with your field, and it leads to a huge epiphany about your life direction. And you could be somebody who thrives on dialogue or spends time analyzing the nuances of a situation, and that mental processing can be what brings new opportunities your way. It can also look like being a jack of all trades or exploring different hobbies and finding little gems of wisdom that could help you understand the big picture better. And you could be someone who learns by multitasking and by asking why, so your growth often happens in the middle of a chaotic brainstorming session or while you are changing your mind about something you thought you knew. And you can use this energy to embrace growth by staying light on your feet and keeping options open. And even if your Jupiter sign is about something heavy or dogmatic, the inquisitive nature of Gemini acts as a support system to help you navigate these topics without getting stuck in one way of thinking. And you can embrace expansion by realizing that every question you ask opens a door, and every shift in your perspective can be part of a larger puzzle. And you don't have to have a single fixed plan to find growth, because you can find it in a variety of your experiences or the clever way that you can solve a problem. And by focusing on your mental flexibility and your willingness to learn, you can create a bridge that carries you toward the big expansive goals of Jupiter. When the ruler of your Jupiter sign is in the sign of Cancer, your emotional intelligence and protective instincts act as the support system that helps you grow. You might find that having a deep emotional connection to what you are doing is the specific tool that gives you the courage to expand in other areas of life. It can feel like you need to feel intuitively right about a situation before you can really go out and conquer the world. Your memory, your empathy, or your ability to nurture a seed of an idea can act as a recharging station that gives you the energy to think bigger. And you can grow the most when you are tending to your inner landscape and making sure your heart is fully engaged in your big dreams. And so in practice, this could look like trusting a hunch that defies logic and suddenly having a huge breakthrough in your career or your studies. And you could be the person who grows by supporting others and find that being a source of comfort makes you way more creative and open to new ideas rather than being cold or detached. It can also show up as learning a lot about your own emotional patterns, and that self-knowledge really giving you a sense of purpose that helps you navigate your life with more confidence. And you could find that when you feel safe to be vulnerable or when you are protecting something you love, you can naturally start attracting opportunities to travel or to learn because you aren't spending all of your energy trying to put up a shield anymore. And so to embrace growth with this energy, you can lean into the idea that your feelings can be a compass and not a distraction. And even if your Jupiter is in a sign that is very mental or intellectual or ambitious, you can use the intuition and tenacity of Cancer as a helper to digest everything you are learning. And you can embrace expansion by creating a life that feels emotionally resonant with who you are. And when you feel stuck, go back to what makes you feel secure, or spend time honing in your ebb and flow. And that can act as a green light for the rest of your life to start moving again. And you don't have to apologize for taking things personally or for feeling emotional, because that personal investment can be exactly where your biggest insights and growth spurts are born. Having the ruler of your Jupiter sign in Leo means that your self-expression and radiant vitality act as the special tools to help your expansion happen. So you might find that when you are operating from a place of authenticity, maybe you're creating art, leading with your heart, or just being visibly yourself, that is when the universe starts giving you more. And your confidence can be the helper that keeps your engine running, and you can grow the most when you are willing to stand out or let your ego be a healthy part of the process. And it can feel like you need to have main character energy and take risks in the name of passion to see real expansion. And so the more you lean into what makes you feel special and unique, even if it's more private, the more you can see the big picture of your life falling into place. And so this can look like taking charge of a situation simply because you care about it and it accidentally turning into a major source of growth or a new life direction. Maybe you could be somebody who finds their biggest opportunities through performance, public speaking, or the sheer force of your personality, because those things open up your heart and make you more optimistic, even if it is more private, like I stated. But it could also manifest as using your warmth to inspire results or inspire others, where your generosity of spirit can be the thing that helps you jump over obstacles that you would otherwise get stuck on. And you can find that when you are proud of what you are doing and staying in a state of creative flow, you are way more likely to notice the lucky breaks and the lessons that Jupiter is trying to send your way. And so you can use this energy to embrace growth by realizing that your desire to be seen, or your desire to be yourself at the very least, can be a productive thing. And it's not just something about being egotistical or vain. And even if your Jupiter is in a humble or analytical sign, you can use the boldness and light of Leo as a mechanism to make that expansion feel less like work and more like a celebration. And you can embrace expansion by trusting your creative voice and giving yourself permission to take up space. And when you feel like your life is getting stagnant, find a way to inject some drama or joy into your day, and that can act like a magnet for new possibilities. And you can grow through your courage and heart to making the whole process of expansion feel way more rewarding and soulful. If the ruler of your Jupiter is in the sign of Virgo, your discernment and analytical skills act as the technical support that can help you reach expansion. And you can be someone who utilizes the process of refinement and the ability to distinguish what is useful from what is not as a way to get ahead. And your attention to detail, desire to be of service, and critical thinking can act as practical tools that help you reach for bigger goals. And it can feel like you need to understand the mechanics of how things work and have a sense of order before you can really feel the benefits of Jupiter. And the more you improve your craft and take care of the small things in life, the more you can create the efficiency for massive growth to happen in a sustainable way in your life. So in a practical sense, this could look like editing a project to perfection and finding that the mastery you gain there spills over into bigger dreams. Or you could be the person who solves a problem that nobody else could fix, and that skill is exactly what leads you to meet the people or find the information that helps you expand your life. It could also show up as being very practical about your growth, like developing a step-by-step plan for your vision. And then that clarity is kind of what makes it real and pushes you to go after it. And you can find that when you are helpful and precise, you naturally fall into situations where you can learn more and take on more responsibility because you see how competent you are. And so you can use this energy to embrace growth by understanding that optimization can lead to abundance over time. And even if your Jupiter sign is about something more abstract or philosophical, the grounded nature of Virgo can act as a technique to help you get there. And you can embrace expansion by finding the purpose in the process and realizing that your ability to critique and improve is building the person you are becoming. And when you feel overwhelmed or lost in the idea of growing, just focus on the nuance of the situation in front of you. And that focus can act as an engine that drives your Jupiter forward, because you don't have to wait for a miracle to grow, because you can build your own luck every day through your intelligence and dedication. When the ruler of your Jupiter sign is in Libra, the specific tool that can help you reach for growth is diplomacy, or the art of relating to others and finding balance. And so you might find that using a sense of balance and the ability to see multiple sides of a story is the method that can help you reach for more. It can feel like you need harmony to see your own potential, and you can grow faster when you are weighing options or engaging in a fair exchange, and your expansion can be facilitated by your ability to beautify and mediate, because your aesthetic or social grace that are things that can really unlock your expansion. And so you can be the kind of person who finds luck through negotiation or a well-timed collaboration, and that connection can act as a bridge to the bigger world that Jupiter wants you to explore. And so, for example, this could look like smoothing over a conflict at work, and that act of peacekeeping positions you for a huge promotion. Or you could find that you don't really start growing until you learn how to mirror others and understand their motivations, which really pushes you to be a more well-rounded version of yourself. But it could also show up as learning a lot about life through the lens of justice and fairness, or maybe finding that your biggest breaks come from your ability to charm or persuade somebody to open a door for you. And you might even find that you travel or go back to school specifically because you want to understand how different people relate to one another, and that social curiosity becomes the wind in your sails. And so you can use this energy to really embrace growth by realizing that your indecision can actually be a form of wisdom, and that seeking counsel counsel can be a powerful move. And even if your Jupiter is in an independent or aggressive sign, you can use the cooperative energy of Libra as a balancing tool to refine those raw impulses. And you can embrace expansion by being open to compromise and trusting that a balanced approach will yield the best results. So when you feel stuck, look at the situation from another person's perspective or bring some beauty into your environment. And that shift in focus can spark that aha moment that can get you moving again. And you can grow through the middle ground and connection, really making your expansion feel graceful and less chaotic. Having the ruler of your Jupiter sign in Scorpio means that your secret weapon that is used in order to help you grow is intensity and a willingness to explore the shadows. So you may find that the taboo stuff like psychological truths, power dynamics, or the cycle of endings and beginnings is the tool that you can use to help you expand your horizons. And it can feel like you have to go through a process of elimination or deep investigation every time you want to level up, and your growth could be tied to how well you can handle the truth. And you have this natural ability to use this X-ray vision and find resources in places that other people are too scared to look. And so this can make your growth very transformative and real because you aren't just skimming the surface. You can be digging for gold in the deepest parts of the world or your own psyche. And so in practice, this could look like obsessively researching a topic until you master it, and that depth of knowledge clears the way for a much bigger and better version of your life to start. You could also be someone who is really good at keeping a secret or managing a crisis, or maybe you find that your biggest expansion is through a moment of absolute vulnerability that changes you forever. It could also show up as being a bit of a strategist in your own life where you understand human nature so well that you can navigate complex situations to your advantage, and you can grow because you aren't afraid of the darker emotions, and that courage will allow you to shed old skin whenever it gets too small for you. And so to embrace the growth of this energy, you have to lean into the idea of destruction and that this can somehow be a form of creation. And so even if your Jupiter is in a sign that likes to keep things light or practical, you can use the piercing energy of Scorpio to ensure that the growth is authentic and not superficial. And you can embrace expansion by trusting your instincts about what lies beneath and being willing to cut ties with what no longer serves you. And when you feel like you are at a standstill, you usually just need to create some deep introspection or confront the fear head on, and that can actually act as a catalyst to help clear the path for your Jupiter to start working its magic again. And you can grow through pressure and metamorphosis, really making you incredibly powerful and wise. If the ruler of your Jupiter is in Sagittarius, your optimism and hunger for the horizon act as the vehicle that will drive you towards your expansion. And you can grow through believing in the best possible outcome, being optimistic, seeking wisdom, and taking massive leaps of faith because there are little bits of magic that can be found in this, and these are the tools that can stretch your spirit the most. And it can feel like you have a need for freedom, and you find that the more you loosen your reins, either mentally or physically, the more you find yourself in that. And so your expansion can be facilitated by your sense of adventure and willingness to gamble on yourself. You could be the person who needs to see the potential in everything, and once you find a mission or a belief that makes sense to you, you will have all the energy needed to go the distance. And so in real life, this can manifest as saying yes to an opportunity you aren't fully qualified for and finding that the experience completely changes your career path or your personality. Or you could be the person who spends time theorizing about the future or seeking out mentors because you just have to know what else is out there. But it could also show up as being a natural philosopher or a guide where you share your enthusiasm with others, and that act of preaching or, exploring is what helps you understand your own life better. And you might find that your biggest breaks happen when you are laughing at the absurdity of life or taking a risk that looks crazy to everybody else. And so you can use this energy to embrace growth by always aiming higher than you think you can reach. And even if your Jupiter is in a cautious or detailed or even debilitated sign, you can use that visionary energy of Sagittarius as a lens to give your practical efforts a sense of, grandeur. And you can embrace expansion by being a seeker of truth and trusting that things will work out in the end. And when you feel bored or trapped, you can find a way to expand your worldview or laugh off a failure, and that mental shift can act like a key that unlocks the whole new level of growth for you. And so you can grow through your buoyancy and inability to be kept down, which keeps your life feeling like a huge, meaningful journey. If the ruler of your Jupiter is in Capricorn, your discipline and respect for structure can act as the framework that you can use to support your growth. You might find that the more you commit to a long-term goal or accept the weight of responsibility, the more you feel like you have the resources to expand into new territories. And it can feel like you need to see a mountain to climb in order to believe that your big dreams are possible. And so your ambition and practical approach can act as the engine for your expansion, because when you feel like you are building something real or building a legacy or working towards a goal, you naturally start looking for the next level of mastery, and you can grow through hard work and delay of gratification, really finding that having a plan gives you the confidence to take the risks that Jupiter wants you to take. So in real life, this could look like spending years mastering a difficult skill, and the expertise suddenly makes you feel brave enough to command a higher salary or start your own enterprise. But you could also find that you're the person who finds their biggest opportunities through proving your reliability to people in charge. And those people can then open a door that you couldn't reach on your own. But it could also show up as utilizing boundaries or time management, where your no is the thing that protects the energy you need for your yes. And you can find that when you are respected for your competence, you have more leverage to create the kind of life you want. And that earned authority can act as a magnet for even more luck and growth in your life. And it all starts with yourself and being willing to implement those structures in your life. And so you can use this energy to embrace growth by realizing that your seriousness can be a valid way to find meaning, and it doesn't mean you're rigid. And even if your Jupiter's in a sign that feels more emotional or impulsive, the Capricorn ruler can act as a backbone to make those fleeting dreams a reality. And you can embrace expansion by taking your potential seriously and understanding that being an authority is how you can contribute to the world, even if you're just an authority to yourself. And so when you feel stuck, really focus on the next steps of the ladder or organizing your resources. And that feeling of control can really act as a spark that gets your growth moving again. And you can grow through resilience and tangible achievements, really making your expansion feel solid and permanent. And that is the biggest gift of this placement. When the ruler of your Jupiter is in Aquarius, your individuality or your vision can act as the unique methods that you can use to help your expansion along. And you can find that being willing to break the rules, like questioning tradition or innovating a new method or embracing your quirks, is a tool that keeps your growth going. And it can feel like your need for freedom or to be objective and to see things as they are and to really innovate systems are the things that keep you moving forward. And your growth can be supported by your ability to network with the collective or think outside the box, because the unconventional path is the one that can hold the key to expansion in your life. And so you can be the kind of person who grows through disruption, and your luck can come from a sudden insight or a community that supports your ideas. And so this can manifest in practice as joining a movement or adopting a piece of technology and finding that it completely changes your life trajectory. And you could find that your biggest breakthroughs happen when you just stop trying to fit in and you start capitalizing on what makes you different and really leaning into it, even if it feels a little bit heavy. And it also shows up as using your mind and your intellect to solve problems that are much bigger than yourself, even if they help yourself at the same time almost. And your objective or visionary perspective will be the thing that allows you to see solutions others miss. And you can find that when you are surrounded by people or ideas that are very respectful of your autonomy and align with your ideals, you'll feel way more optimistic and ready to take on the world, because you know you aren't bound by the old ways of doing things. And so to embrace growth with this setup, you can lean into the idea that being the odd one out can be your greatest asset. And even if your Jupiter is in a more traditional or personal sign, the Aquarius ruler can act as this modernization or innovative tool to help you bring that personal growth into the context that really benefits something much bigger than yourself or really pushes the boundaries of what's possible. And you can embrace expansion by being the rebel and trusting that the more you honor your unique frequency, the more the universe will align with you. And when you feel stagnant, it's a good time to get some distance from a situation or to try something completely experimental. And that electric energy, even if it's in a vacuum and by yourself and not like this big grand thing, can act like a battery that recharges your Jupiter, and you can grow through your brilliance or detachment, and you can make your life feel like an evolution rather than just something that sits still in a pond. If the ruler of Jupiter is in Pisces, your imagination and capacity for surrender can act like the spiritual tools to help you access growth. And you may find that the intangible parts of life, like your dreams, your empathy, your ability to surrender, go with the flow, your compassion, are the methods that you can use to expand. And it can feel like you have to loosen your grip before you can grab onto anything new, and your growth can be tied to how well you can trust the universe. And you can grow through the blurred lines where logic fails and intuition takes over. And this really makes your growth feel fluid and sometimes a bit magical, where you have sudden downloads or synchronicity that changes everything about how you see the world. In a practical sense, this can look like giving up on a rigid plan and just drifting for a while. Maybe you take a chill pill, only to find that the current carries you to a massive opportunity for expansion that you could have never planned for. Or you could be the person who has a creative vision or spiritual insight, and even if that doesn't make sense on paper, you follow it and it leads to success. But it could also show up as finding growth through compassion or artistic expressions, where you are focused on the universal or emotional side of life. And you can find that when you dissolve your boundaries or trust in your sensitivity, you can stumble into the right places at the right time because you are tuned into a frequency that others may miss. And you can use this energy to really embrace growth by understanding that your confusion can actually, be a state of creation. And even if your Jupiter is in a very detailed or active or less, fluid and abstract sign, the Pisces ruler can give you the faith to make sure that your activity has a soul. And you can embrace the expansion by trusting the process and realizing that not every step of the journey has to be linear. And when you feel overwhelmed or lost, you can retreat into your imagination or connect with something divine like music or nature. And that piece can act like a compass that points your Jupiter in the right direction. And you can grow through your beliefs and your softness, really making your expansion feel deep and limitless. When the ruler of your Jupiter sign is sitting in your first house, your own physical presence and your personality can be primary tools for your growth. And you basically are the engine for your own luck, because your identity and the way you show up in a room is what triggers the expansion. And it can feel like you have this internal battery where the more you lean into being yourself and taking care of your own needs, the more the world starts to open up for you. And you don't really need to look outside for a reason to get started on something big, because your own gut instincts and your physical energy are the things that actually make your growth happen in the first place. It is a very me first kind of feel, but in a way that helps you grow, because you are literally carrying the key to your own expansion inside your own body and your own character. And it doesn't have to be from ego. It can just be from self-love. And so in real life, this looks like you walking into a new situation. And just by being bold or authentic, you end up stumbling into a massive opportunity. Maybe you decide to change your look or to start a new fitness routine, and suddenly your mindset shifts so much that you start seeing possibilities for a future that weren't there before. And you might find that when you focus on your own personal brand or how you present yourself to others, people start to, offer you ways to learn or to travel or to expand your horizons in some way, because they are attracted to that self-assured energy that you are putting out. And it can also manifest as you being the one who has to physically go somewhere to do something with your own two hands to get a project off of the ground. And your personal effort is the exact thing that turns a small idea into a huge success. And so you can use this energy to embrace growth by realizing that your personal development is never a waste of time, and it always leads to something bigger. And even if your Jupiter is in a house that feels quiet or hidden, having the ruler in your first house means that you have to be the one to initiate the action to get that quiet growth moving. And you embrace the expansion by trusting that your first impressions and your personal desires are valid guides for where you should be heading next. And when you feel stuck, you just have to focus back on your own self-improvement or your own physical vitality. And this acts as a spark plug that gets the wheels of your Jupiter turning again. And it makes the growth feel very personal and very much under your own control, because you are the one who is driving the car. Having the ruler of your Jupiter sign in the second house means that your values or your physical resources are the specific tools that you can use to expand. And you find that your sense of self-worth and the things you actually own or earn are the fuel that keeps your growth growing. It's like you need a solid foundation of security or a clear idea of what matters before you can really feel comfortable reaching for more. And so you can use your monies, your talents, or your possessions as a way to buy yourself the freedom or the education that Jupiter wants skills for you. Even if you don't have a lot now, just even using your skills, your developing skills can help you. And so the more that you build up your own stable ground and realize that you are actually worthy of so many good things, the more you will feel like you have the permission to grow into a bigger, better version of yourself. This manifests in practice as maybe, for example, you're using your savings to fund a trip that changes your life, or maybe you're investing in a course that helps you see the world differently. Maybe you're investing your time to develop a new skill as well, because time is also a resource. And you might be the kind of person who needs to feel very materially, financially safe, or maybe you need to feel confident before you take a leap of faith into maybe a new career or a big move in your life, no matter what that move is. And it also shows up as you using your natural skills, like maybe you're great with your hands, or you have a good eye for quality, to really create a life that feels more expansive and meaningful. And you can find that your growth is very tied to the physical world. And so buying a home or curating your space, or, doing things for yourself that may be a little bit materialistic, or doing things that feel high quality, but also steady, can give you the emotional room to think bigger and dream more. And so to embrace this growth with your setup, you have to lean into the idea that being practical and visionary go hand in hand for you. And so even if your Jupiter is in a very spiritual and abstract house, you can use the stability of the second house to give that spirit really a place to land and grow. And you embrace expansion by being the good steward of what you have and recognizing your possessions as like tools and weapons that can really, help you reach your higher goals. And you don't have to feel guilty about wanting security, because that security is the exact thing that allows you to take risks later on. And when you treat your self-esteem and your bank account like a garden, the growth of your Jupiter is the natural fruit that will come from this consistent care. If the ruler of your Jupiter is in the third house, your mindset and your local environment are the main fuel sources for your expansion. And so you can grow through the way you talk, the way you think, and the people you interact with on a daily basis. Maybe like your neighbors, or, just anybody who you communicate to. And so information is your best friend here, because the more you learn about the world around you and the more you share your ideas, the bigger your world will become, even if you think your ideas are crazy. And you have this knack for taking small pieces of information and turning them into big or useful philosophies, even if you don't realize you have this gift. And your curiosity can be a tool that keeps you moving forward. And you can find that being busy or staying connected to your immediate surroundings actually helps you to find meaning and purpose that you're looking for. In a practical sense, this can look like you having a conversation at a coffee shop that leads to a huge epiphany about your life direction. Maybe you're someone who writes a lot or spends a lot of time on social media sharing your thoughts, and that communication is what brings you opportunities. And it can also look like you taking short trips, or maybe even exploring your own city, and you find little gems of wisdom that help you understand the big picture later. And so you are somebody who learns by doing and talking it out, even if it's just with yourself. And so your growth often happens in the middle of a brainstorm or while you're reading a book, and that completely flips your perspective on how things work. And so you use this energy to embrace growth by staying flexible and keeping your mind open to new ways of thinking. And even if your Jupiter house is about something very heavy or serious, the light and quick energy of the third house will help you navigate those topics without getting bogged down. And you embrace expansion by really realizing that every person you meet has something to teach you, and every bit of data you collect is part of a larger puzzle, even if it's, bogus data, if that makes sense. And so you don't have to go through the other side of the world to find growth, because you can find it right in your own neighborhood, or in a book, or in a podcast, or in the way you choose to phrase a sentence. And by focusing on communication and your daily mental habits, you can create a bridge that carries you towards big, expansive goals of Jupiter, and this can really help you change your life. When the ruler of your Jupiter sign is in your fourth house, your sense of belonging, safety, your innermost self, and your roots, also your home life, are the major fuel sources for your growth. And so you find that having a solid home base or a deep connection to your roots is the tool that gives you the courage to expand in other areas of your life. It is like you need to feel emotionally safe and tucked in before you can really go out and conquer the world. Maybe your family, your ancestors, or just the literal four walls that you live in, even if it's like your self-made definition of home and family, will act as a recharging station where you get the energy to think bigger. And so you grow most when you are tending to your innermost self and making sure your private life feels like a safe haven that supports your big dreams. And so in practice, this looks like you finally getting your living situation organized and suddenly having a huge breakthrough, maybe in your career, in your studies, or with your self-confidence. And so you might be a person who works from home and finds that being in your own space makes you way more creative and open to new ideas than being in an office. But it can also show up as you learning a lot about your family history, and that knowledge giving you a sense of purpose that helps you navigate your life with more confidence. And you might find that when you feel at home, no matter what it is, whether it's within your own skin or in a specific place, you naturally start attracting opportunities to maybe travel or learn or to expand your life in some way, because you aren't spending all of your energy just trying to feel safe anymore. And so to embrace growth with this energy, you have to lean into the idea that your private life is just as important as everything else going on in your life. And even if your Jupiter is in a house that is very out there, like the 10th house or the 11th house, you use the comfort and privacy of the 4th house to digest everything that you are learning, no matter where it is that you're learning. And you embrace expansion by creating a personal environment that reflects the person you want to become. And when you feel stuck, you just go back to your roots or spend some time making your home feel beautiful. And that act is basically a green light for the rest of your life to start moving again. And you don't have to apologize for needing a safe haven to retreat to, because that safe haven is exactly where your biggest insights and growth spurts are born. Having the ruler of your Jupiter sign in the 5th house means that your creativity and your sense of fun are the specific tools that you use to grow. And so you find that when you are doing things just for the joy of it, like hobbies, romance, maybe playing around with new ideas, working with children, or just tapping into your own childlike joy, that is when the universe starts giving you more, and your self-expression is the fuel that keeps your engine running, and you grow the most when you are being extra and letting your light shine, no matter how that shining really looks. It could be very private or very external. And it is like you need to have a bit of a why not attitude and take some risks in the name of pleasure to see any real expansion. And so the more you lean into what makes you feel alive and excited, the more you see the big picture of your life falling into place. And so, for example, this can look like you starting a fun side project just for the hell of it, and it accidentally turning into a major source of growth or even a completely new life direction. And you could be someone who finds their biggest opportunities maybe through social events, dating, maybe through children, or at least, tapping into your hobbies and your sense of joy, because those things can open up your heart and make you feel a little bit more optimistic about life. And it can also manifest as your unique talents, for example, solving a problem where your creative solution is the thing that helps you to jump over obstacles that maybe other people get stuck on or maybe other people struggle with, and you are able to get over that, and it is such a great learning opportunity for you. And you find when you are having a good time and staying in a state of play, you are just way more likely to notice the lucky breaks and the lessons that Jupiter is trying to send your way, even if it's a tough lesson. And you use this energy to embrace growth by realizing that your happiness is a productive thing and it's not just a luxury. And so even if your Jupiter is in a very serious or heavy sign or house like Capricorn or the 10th house or wherever it may be, you can use the lightness and the spark of the 5th house to make that expansion feel a little less like a chore and more like a fun game that you can embrace. And you can embrace expansion by trusting your creative impulses and giving yourself permission to be seen and heard. And when you feel like your life is getting a little bit stagnant, you have to find a way to inject some fun or some romance or some play into your day. And that acts like a magnet for new possibilities that may surpass your logic, if that makes sense. And so you can grow your heart and your passions, and that makes the whole process for expansion feel way more rewarding and soulful. If the ruler of your Jupiter sign is in the 6th house, your daily routines and work habits are the main tools you use for expansion. And so you are somebody who grows through the grind and the small, boring tasks you do every single day to keep your life running smoothly. And so your health, your schedule, and your sense of service can be fuel sources that allow you to reach for bigger goals. It's like you need to have your ducks in a row, no matter how it looks, even if it's a little bit of an unconventional schedule, but you also need to have your to-do list checked off before you can can really see or feel the benefits of Jupiter. And so the more you refine your processes and take care of the details, the more you create the space for massive growth to actually happen in a sustainable way. And so in a practical sense, for example, this could look like you starting a new morning routine or a workout plan and finding that the discipline you gain there spills over into your big picture dreams. Or you may be the person who gets a job where you are helping others or fixing things, and that role is exactly what leads you to meet the people or find the information that helps you to grow and expand your life and find opportunities. But it can also show up as you being very meticulous about your growth. Like maybe you need to keep a detailed journal or a tracker for your goals. Maybe you need a New Year's resolution. And that focus is what makes them real. And you find that when you are useful and efficient, you naturally fall into situations where you can learn more and take on more responsibility because people see how reliable you are. Or maybe you just find opportunities fall in your life the more that you take care of yourself. And you can use this energy to really embrace growth by understanding that small steps can lead to huge distances over time. And even if your Jupiter house is about something very big or distant, like the 9th house, the practical nature of the 6th house gives you the how-to manual to kind of get there. And you embrace expansion by finding the magic in the mundane and realizing that your daily habits are building the person you are becoming. And when you feel overwhelmed by the idea of growing or changing, you just have to focus on the next small task in front of you. And that focus acts as an engine that can drive your Jupiter forward. And you don't have to wait for a miracle to grow because you are building your own luck every day through your hard work or your attention to detail. When the ruler of your Jupiter sign is in the 7th house, you find that your main fuel source for growth or a tool you can tap into is other people and the relationships you form or through the mirror of another person. And so you find that maybe having a teammate or a partner in crime or somebody to bounce ideas off of is the specific tool that helps you reach for more in life. And it's like you need a mirror to see your own potential, and you grow way faster when you are collaborating or even just debating with someone else. And your expansion is really tied to your ability to connect, or maybe, just your skills are very compatible with connection because other people bring perspectives or opportunities that you just wouldn't find on your own. And you could be the kind of person who finds their luck through a handshake or conversation with another person. And that connection acts as a bridge to the bigger world that your Jupiter wants to explore. And so, for example, this could look like meeting a coworker, a business partner, for example, who has the exact skills you lack, and together you can turn a tiny idea into something big. And you might find that you don't really start growing until you get into a committed relationship. It could be romantic or platonic. You don't grow until you bond with someone. And that's because maybe partners or friends can really push you to be a better version of yourself. But it can also show up as you just being somebody who learns a lot about life through watching how people handle things. Or maybe you find that your biggest breaks come from maybe somebody who introduces you to a new way of thinking. And you might even find that you travel or go back to school, or you just unlock new opportunities in your life, or you gain big wins specifically because somebody you care about encouraged you to do it. And their belief in you becomes like the wind in your sails almost. And so you can use this energy to embrace growth by realizing you don't have to do everything by yourself, and that asking for help and reaching out to others in connection is actually a power move for you. And even if your Jupiter is in a very solo house, like the 1st house or the 12th house, you can use this energy of the 7th house to bring those private goals out to light. And you embrace expansion by being open to what other people have to offer and trusting that a good partnership will double your results. And when you feel stuck, you just have to reach out to somebody who you trust and talk it through. And that interaction usually sparks the aha moment that gets your growth moving again. And so you can grow through the us and the we, and that makes your expansion feel way more supported and a lot less lonely. Having the ruler of your Jupiter in the 8th house means that your fuel for growth comes from deep transformations, maybe shared resources, or the heavy, deep parts of life. And so you could find that the heavy stuff in life, like intimacy, psychology, maybe managing other people's money or shared resources, is the tool that you can use to expand your horizons. And it is like you have to go through a bit of a rebirth every time you want to level up and transmutate. And your growth could be tied to how well you can handle change and the unknown. Maybe maybe that is your secret weapon, is you are so resilient. And you can have this natural ability to look under the surface and find value in things that other people are too scared to touch. And this makes your growth very intense and very real because you aren't just skimming the surface. You are digging for gold in the deep parts of your own psyche and your shared life with others. But also, this is kind of the placement, in my opinion, of people who are really good at manifesting. So if you're not into that or you think it's a little bit weird, I would look into it. And so in practice, this could look like you going through a major life crisis that feels hard at the time, but ends up clearing way for much bigger and better versions of your life to start. And you might be someone who is really good at taking a mess and really turning it into a message. Or maybe you find that you get your biggest expansion through inheritances or loans, or maybe combining your assets with another person. And it can also show up as you being a bit of a detective in your own life, where you research topics like occultism, finance, psychology, maybe even true crime, until you have a deep understanding that gives you a huge advantage in life. And you can grow because you aren't afraid of the truth, and that honestly allows you to shed your old skin whenever it gets too small for you. And so to embrace growth with this energy, you have to lean into the idea that letting go is just as important as grabbing on. And even if your Jupiter is in a house that likes to keep things steady, like the second house or the fourth house, you can use the turn of the eighth house to keep things going and keep them from getting stagnant. And you embrace expansion by trusting your gut feelings and being willing to look at the dark parts of a situation just to find the light. And when you feel like you are at a standstill, you can be the type of person who just needs to do some deep inner work, or to settle some kind of like shared debt, or maybe like a deep entanglement. And that will clear the path for your Jupiter to start working its magic again. And you can really grow through cycles of death and rebirth. And that makes you so resilient and wise and honestly magical. If the ruler of your Jupiter is in the ninth house, welcome to the club. Your main fuel source for growth is the big picture and the search for meaning. So you can grow through things like travel, higher education, or maybe exploring different belief systems, because these are the tools that can stretch your mind the most. And it is like you have a hunger for the truth, and you find that the further you go from home, either physically or mentally, the more you can find yourself, because your problem seems a little bit smaller. And so your expansion is tied into your sense of adventure and your willingness to be a student of life. And so you can be a person who needs to see the why behind everything. And once you find a philosophy or a vision that makes sense to you, you will have all the energy you need to go the distance. And so in real life, this can manifest as you booking a one-way ticket to a country you've never been to and finding that the experience completely changes your career path or your personality. And you could be the person who spends years in university or reading every book on a specific topic because you just have to know everything there is to know. But it can also show up as you maybe being a natural teacher or a storyteller, where you want to share your big ideas with others. And that act of sharing actually helps you to understand your own life better. I have this placement actually, and this YouTube channel is a big example, because I learn a lot when I'm writing things as well. Trust me, I need help too. And so you might find that your biggest breaks actually happen when you are out of your comfort zone, or when you are talking to someone who has a completely different background than you do. And you use this energy, or you can use it, to embrace growth by always keeping your eyes on the horizon and never settling for just okay. And even if your Jupiter is in a very practical or small scale house like the sixth house, you can use the wide angle lens of the ninth house to give your daily work a sense of purpose. And you can embrace expansion by being a lifelong learner and trusting that there's always more to the story than what you can see right now. And when you feel bored or trapped, you just have to find a way to learn something new or change your perspective, and that mental shift can act like a key that unlocks your whole life or unlocks a new level of growth. And you can grow through your faith in the future and your curiosity about the world. And that keeps your fire and your life feeling like a huge, meaningful journey. If the ruler of your Jupiter sign is sitting in the 10th house, your public reputation, your sense of achievement, or at least your ambitions can be your main tools that you can use to grow. And you find that the more you climb the ladder or get recognized for your hard work, or the more you just go for your goals, the more you feel like you have the fuel to expand into new territories. And it's like you need to see the tangible result or a title next to your name to really believe that your dreams are possible, or you just need to, believe in yourself enough to go for it, to really expand your life life. And so maybe your career and the way that the world sees you can act as an engine for your expansion, because when you feel like an authority, when you feel confident, when you feel like a professional, or when you feel like a leader, you can naturally start looking for the next big mountain to climb, and you can grow through the structure of your public life. And you find that having a role to play in society, even if it's a self-label, really gives you the confidence to take the risks that Jupiter wants you to take. And so in real life, this could look like you getting a major promotion at work, and that win suddenly makes you feel brave enough to sign up for a graduate program or move to a new city or go on the date that you didn't want to go on. And you could be the person who finds their biggest opportunities, maybe through bosses or mentors, people who are kind of in leadership positions who really see your potential. And this can open you doors that you couldn't reach on your own, but it can also show up as you building a personal brand, maybe a business, or even just a sense of self where your expert status is the thing that brings you the travel or the opportunities that you've always wanted. And you can find that when you are being respected in your field, or when you are respecting yourself and your own authority, you can have more leverage to create the kind of life that you want. And that public success can act as a magnet for even more luck and growth. And so you can use this energy to embrace growth by realizing that your ambitions are a valid way to find meaning, and they aren't just about ego. And so even if your Jupiter is in a house that feels very private or sensitive, like the 4th house, the 10th house ruler gives you the practical clout to make those private dreams a reality. And you can embrace expansion by taking your responsibilities seriously and understanding that being a leader or achiever is how you can contribute to the world and your own life. You just need to be proud of whatever it is that you do. And so when you feel stuck, you just have to focus on mastering a new skill or finishing a big project or really working on yourself. And that feeling of making it can act as the spark that gets your growth moving again. And so you can grow through your legacy or your public contributions, and that can make your expansion feel very solid but also very well earned. When the ruler of your Jupiter sign is in the 11th house, your community, your social circles, maybe your role in society are the specific tools you can use to expand. And you find that maybe being a part of a group or a cause, like a circle of friends, a professional organization, a social movement, is the fuel that really can keep your growth going. And it's like you need the vibe of other people or a shared vision for the future to really feel like you are moving forward. Even if you're an introvert, trust me, this is what you need to go for, because your growth will be tied into your ability to network and collaborate, because the people you know will be the ones who hold the keys to expansion that you are looking for in your life. And you are the kind of person who grows through people power, and your luck usually comes from a friend of a friend or a group that you belong to that points you in the right direction. And so this can manifest in practice as you joining a hobby group or an online community and finding a mentor there who completely changes your life trajectory. And you can find that your biggest breakthroughs will happen when you are brainstorming with a team or working towards a goal that benefits more than just yourself, but it can also show up as you using social media or technology to reach a massive audience, where your place in society is the thing that allows you to share your ideas and learn from others on a global scale. And you can find that when you are surrounded by people who just get you or share your hopes, you feel way more optimistic and ready to take on the world, because you know you aren't doing it alone. And so to embrace this growth, or to embrace growth with this setup, you really need to lean into the idea that your friends or your tribe or your cause can be your greatest assets. And even if your Jupiter is in a very internal or self-focused house, like the 12th house, for example, the 11th house ruler will help you bring that personal growth out into the collective, where it can really take off. And you can embrace expansion by being a connector and trusting that the more you help others reach their goals, or the more that you at least walk with others, the more the universe will help you reach your goals. And so when you feel stagnant, you just have to get out there and talk to people or join new groups. And that social energy can act like a battery, even if you're an introvert, that can really recharge your Jupiter. And so you can grow through your hopes for the future, and your connections to the world can really make your life feel like a shared adventure, where not only other people win, but you can win through those connections and that deep sense of purpose as well. If the ruler of your Jupiter sign is in the 12th house, your subconscious mind or your spiritual life, the things that are unseen, are the main fuel sources for your growth. And so you could find that the unseen parts of life, like your dreams, your intuition, maybe your time spent in solitude, could be the tools that you actually need to expand. And it is like you have to go inward before you can go outward. And your growth is tied into how well you can listen to your own soul. And you can grow through the quiet moments where nothing seems to be happening on the surface, but everything is shifting deep down. And this can make your growth feel very mystical and sometimes a bit behind the scenes. Maybe it feels like you're manifesting. This is a placement that is very common with people who are good at manifesting stuff, or this could feel like having a sudden epiphany while you are alone that really changes everything about how you see the world. And so in a practical sense, for example, this could look like maybe you're taking a little break. Maybe you're in your hermit phase when you step back from the world to really meditate or reflect, and you somehow come out with a totally new life philosophy. And you might be the person who has a gut feeling about a certain path, and even if it doesn't make sense on paper, you follow it and it leads to a massive opportunity for expansion. But it can also show up as you finding growth through helping people who are unseen, or maybe in solitude, or working in places like hospitals or retreats where you are focused on the spiritual and emotional side of life. And you can find with that, when you surrender to the flow of life, trust your intuition, you can stumble into the right places at the right time because you are tuned into a frequency that other people miss. And you can use this energy to embrace growth by understanding that your alone time is actually your most productive time. And even if your Jupiter is in a very busy or logical house like the 6th house or the 10th house, the 12th house ruler gives you the depth to really make sure that the busyness actually means something. And you embrace expansion by trusting the process and realizing that not every step of the journey has to be visible to the world right away. And so when you feel overwhelmed or lost, you have to retreat into your own inner world. Use it as an opportunity. Connect to something bigger than yourself, like nature or a spiritual practice. And that silence can act like a compass that points your Jupiter in the right direction. And you can grow through your spirit and your compassion. And that makes your expansion feel very deep, but oh so powerful.